All right. Hello, monkey. Was it a good monkey? Yeah. I'll reveal my face.
Hey guys.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, when we talk about the vaccine issue, we really need to make sure that people are operating with the full knowledge of how we handle vaccines and vaccine injury and adverse events related to these really pharmaceutical drugs. And so people need to know that in 1986, the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act was passed and signed into law by President Reagan. It was sponsored by a Democrat. What it did is basically set up a new regime of regulatory courts and system to really handle the massive amounts of vaccine injuries and deaths. And even back then, in the memo that was used to promote the bill in Congress, said that the seriousness of this amount of people that have been hurt by vaccines was not being taken seriously. And so now you flash forward to today, where we have so many more vaccines being pushed and mandated and created and whatnot. So if there was this seriousness back in 1986, before they were given an immunity shield, a liability shield, you can imagine where we are at today. And so when you look at coronavirus vaccine, I mean, why would anybody want to rush to go get a vaccine that was pushed, hurry through the process? And I think that it's ridiculous to say that we can't reopen society until we have a coronavirus vaccine. That is just outside of what the data shows that we need to do. And I think that really with the vaccine issue and the shutdowns, the quarantines, whatnot, we're not really seeing people in government or people in pharmaceutical drug companies really being that forthcoming with data and information. And you look at like the amount of coronavirus deaths, is that number even truly reflective of how many people have died strictly because of coronavirus? Or was it that they died from getting hit by a truck and they happened to test for coronavirus, so we're going to list that as a coronavirus death? I think all of these things combined create a perfect storm, whether it's the lack of liability for pharmaceutical companies, or the bad statistics, or there's always an agenda by somebody, somewhere, somehow. And I think that we shouldn't be, holding people hostage to get a vaccine that could be extremely profitable for a very select few amount of people. And I think that, there's all these vaccines being promoted all over the place. And it's just, it really looks to me like the politics that I saw in California with the mandates to, really make it almost impossible for even a medical doctor to give medical exemption to a child who needs it. And so when you look at the way that exemptions have worked as well, the coronavirus vaccine presents a lot of potential trouble down the road.
Yes, surprisingly, for the most part, I agree. But ambiently, of what you were saying, for instance, when you mentioned that they're overcounting people in trucks, who get hit by trucks. Now, if we extend your argument, we extend it, say, to HIV, nobody would have died from HIV. They all die from pneumonia. And in fact, the mortality statistics are way higher than is being indicated right now. All you have to do is take an average every month of how many people die in the United States, April, March, February, and then May, and then see how many there are this year. If you do those statistics, then the count goes way up. And so you can figure out actually how many people have actually died. So talking about people doing whatever they want and reopening right now is extremely, I would call this the motherlode of bad ideas, because every country that has, successfully flattened their curve and reopened, New Zealand, for instance, just one mortality yesterday. They closed down, they obeyed the orders of or instructions or guidance of their government, and they're doing incredibly better. Australia, the same case. These are islands, yes. I mean, those are totally islands, and I get that. But anywhere where it's disorganized, like the U.S., we are not the worst in the world. If you're in New York City, I don't know where you are. We are the worst in the entire state and nation, everywhere. New York City, we're a disaster zone. America is a scam. Nothing works. We can't manufacture a mask. So telling people to go out and play, I don't think it works, man. I think that we absolutely need to address the fact that this country doesn't make anything anymore, that we're getting sold masks by the Chinese, and we should absolutely shelter in place until it becomes practical to open, until the people transmitting it to other people is less than 1 to 1, used to be 4 to 1. And then people 65 plus and who have underlying conditions, they practically cannot come out until there is a vaccine, because they will likely die, probably 1 in 2 chance. Everyone here on this this board here, all of us, we will suffer like motherfuckers, and we might have ongoing lung damage, but we will not die. So I don't think this is the time actually to be advocating. Well, it's a terrible time to be advocating for vaccines, obviously, when people are like dying to get one. But I agree with an approach to vaccine, which you have mentioned. There are probably corporations that, in fact, are manufacturing needless vaccines for profit. So in that, I agree with you. But right now, to be discussing this, it's a weird time to be discussing it. That's all.
Yeah, I think that we should go back to the beginning where it's not like HIV and the pneumonia connection, because unlike, if you have HIV and you are more susceptible to pneumonia, it's you contracting pneumonia was
the same thing's happening.
By that.
People are dying of pneumonia. I've had my neighbor contracted it.
Yeah, but you were saying that listing something that's clearly not a coronavirus death as a coronavirus death is like the HIV to pneumonia case.
It's not happening.
They're
undercounting.
In some areas, I mean, that's, but you're not letting me finish my
okay.
point. So you cannot say that listing, so let's just say somebody got hit by a truck and they had coronavirus and you list that as a coronavirus death. That's not the same as what you try to make the comparison with saying what that would be like in relation to HIV and pneumonia. Because unlike having HIV, which can make you more susceptible to pneumonia, having coronavirus doesn't really make you more susceptible to getting hit by a truck, I don't think. The other thing is that
it makes you more susceptible to pneumonia. That's where they're counting the deaths as pneumonia deaths as corona deaths.
There's people that are being counted as a coronavirus death that it's not that kind of a connection. And in some areas you do have undercounting of coronavirus deaths. In Oregon, there seems to be some sort of cover up with especially deaths in nursing homes, which is disgusting. And so I think that in so many ways, you look at all of these different variables, there are so many variables. If you start looking at, well, this country just had a complete lockdown, or this country didn't do a lockdown, and look at how they were able to go out in public. Well, they also may have had more aggressive contact tracing, which some Americans that want to reopen would be unwilling to do because of like civil liberties and data issues, and they get freaked out when they even hear the word tracing. But from a standpoint of trying to reopen or just stay locked down forever, I mean, people already are committing suicide, businesses are being lost, and I don't think it's realistic to wait for some, pharmaceutical concoction they call a vaccine that was rushed through to reopen. And, wearing some janky mask made out of a ratty ass t-shirt isn't going to save you from coronavirus. So we, I think, are looking at, failed leadership across the board, from city, county, state, federal agencies, all the way up and down. And really, I mean, it doesn't appear to me that anyone was really prepared for this. And it's easy for people who are not in those positions to go and say, oh, well, we have failed leadership. Because obviously no one can ever prepare for what we've had to deal with, to do it, execute everything perfectly. But I mean, for some of this is like so glaring. And I think what you're talking about with manufacturing is a big issue, because, you have the governor of Oregon, for example, Kate Brown, is praising China for, shipping out 50,000 face masks. And it's just like, you just see all this like political stuff. And at the end of the day, I don't really feel like I see any one person doing like killer job addressing coronavirus. And I mean, that's, I think, pretty sad.
Well, there are a couple. I mean, for instance, there's South Korea, who have it under complete control. There is New Zealand, who I mentioned, has it under complete control. To give you an example of undercounting, in the month of April in New York City, the ambulance corps used to pick up 25 bodies a day over the past 3 years. Then, during this year, they were picking up about 200 more bodies a day, 225 bodies a day. Those bodies weren't tested. They were not tested because nobody wants to waste fucking tests. So those are not included in the figures. So what's happening is it's just a mass massacre of elderly people going on, which is really, really silly. There has been leadership, as I said, in Finland. They have like 55 fatalities. Sweden has a going alone strategy where they are they're allowing people to use their own good judgment. They have a 10 times higher death rate than Finland and Norway and Holland, but they're going for herd immunity. However, they have a healthcare system. Now, our failure, we are the worst in the world, except for China, because we don't know what the fuck is going on there, right? We are the worst in the world. We spend twice as much as any other country in the world on healthcare. So what it points to has nothing to do with like opening or closing the country. It's an endemic rot. The whole healthcare system is obviously a scam. We can't manufacture a mask. We used to manufacture B-52 bombs. We used to do all these things. We can't distribute the masks that we get. We can't write a check from the government. This is really a subject even too big for the narrow topic at hand. But I would suggest to you that the deaths are probably undercounted by about 50%. I think like a plan, a federal plan, which is not coercive and fits Americans would be great. You said there's a lot of variables for every country. It doesn't change the fact we are the worst in the world. If you take New York City out, that changes, but that's where we are.
I would have to say, I think China is probably the worst, not America.
Probably, yeah. Nobody can count on their statistics. No way.
If you take out China and all these other messed up countries, then I mean, come on.
We're still the worst. You'd have to take out New York City because we have 1/3 of all cases. Then you could say it's on par with the handling, regionally speaking. But we are the worst because people aren't listening.
What do you think of Governor Cuomo's response to coronavirus?
Disastrous. He should have shut down a week earlier. The governor of Colorado shut down 1 week earlier. That would have limited cases by about 50%. Right now, it's too late. We're just going to have to, as much as we can, sit it out, go back to work in stages, brace for the second wave. There will be no vaccine for several months. People will go back to work. The elderly will die. a lot of people in this country don't care about that. They're like, okay, great, we have a more healthy workforce. You know, it's like a culling thing. It's like they use the word herd very purposefully. But I think old people are precious. I love my grandparents. I'm sorry, but that's the only thing I see. And I wish we had some leadership. Cuomo doesn't know. Trump doesn't know. We need an intelligent, technocrat to actually statistically find out when it's safe to go outside, when one person who gets it is infecting 0.5 people. Like I haven't forgiven him for Windows 95 yet. So
yeah, and I haven't forgiven him for Windows Me. So I think that, I mean, I find it very rich that, I mean, I look at a lot of these people in positions of very large influence and decision making, and in positions of great power, and most of them wouldn't be anywhere without money. They're not experts or considered experts because they truly are an expert in any one specific thing. They are there because of family money, inherited wealth, and then gambling and taking risks with inherited wealth. I mean, that is not merit-based at all. No. And to have, the same people that turn around and call, Ivy League educated physicians, Ivy League educated lawmakers, and Ivy League educated attorneys, just stupid, and people that have Google degrees, when they talk about these serious healthcare issues and the problems with vaccines, they let these people that label all of those people as stupid are very quick to give Bill Gates complete and total authority, global authority. Last time I checked, he was not the president of the world. Right. But because he has like multinational influence and multinational wealth, probably most of which these governments don't even all know how much money he really has. And he can even create a decent tech platform. Why is he running medical policy? I mean, it's absurd. And I think from the technocrat aspect, I mean, I am all for experts running things, but it's like, what is an expert? Like our elite are no longer, maybe never have been elite. Experts are not actually experts. And so to me, having Bill Gates, blather on and make all this stuff up and say, we can't reopen until we have, 5 billion people vaccinated. So we won't be able to no one will be able to do anything until 5 billion people are injected with a drug that you make.
And we don't even know if it's going to be safe, right? Like
it's holding the globe hostage. One person gets to hold everyone hostage. Like, I mean, I don't think it's safe. And I think that Bill Gates is a very dangerous element when given this much latitude to influence this many countries' policy simply because he's a wealthy, like, failed tech, person.
Exactly. Terrible tech, not good for the world. I would say this in response to that. There are experts. If you have virology experts working hand in hand with administrators and economists, and you have a task force on that, and they can figure out when you can go out. Probably everyone under 65 can start going out pretty darn soon. As far as Bill Gates, we should tax the fuck out of him. He's sitting on immense amount of wealth that should circulate in the economy that's offshore, no taxes being paid, have him pay for the whole fucking thing. And he'll still have $84 billion left, so fuck him.
Well, here's what I don't get. When he has the Gates Foundation, he can put money into that foundation that is not taxable, but I also read that he put his shares into the Gates Foundation. Is that the case?
I don't know.
Shares of Microsoft.
Yeah, I don't know, but I do think he should be taxed at a confiscatory rate, so to speak, because his value is not enough. He should pay for the vaccine, all the resources to do that, all the masks. Why not? Why
Jonathan, do you agree?
Well, I think that, it's like I look at this with a lot of issues. You look at special interests like Planned Parenthood or Bill Gates, and if they believe in redistributing wealth, and they believe so much in these different things that they promote, then why not give it for free?
Right. Of course.
So like they never do.
They don't.
So, all these governments have to spend unlimited amounts of money on these vaccines that go into it's so over the top ridiculous to me.
With government help as well. They get
Right.
government assistance and all sorts of things. Jillian hasn't spoken in a while. I've been blathering on, so I'm gonna close my mouth for a minute.
Oh,
Let's hear from you.
oh, okay. Yeah. No, I was honestly, I was super engaged in what you guys were saying, to be honest. And I'm kind of, I feel like everyone is making some pretty decent points, and I'm just sort of trying to figure out what exactly. I was sort of like this to begin with. I'm not really sure which end of the spectrum I completely agree with at this point, because I feel like they're just really good points on both sides of the argument.
Cool.
I'd say
I'm
the
just
same
kind of-
thing.
So I'm just very interested in
Yeah.
and at this point, even still, I feel like good points were made on both sides. And it seems like there's certainly, in terms of the Bill Gates issue, it sounds like there's a lot of agreement there.
Bill Gates is not
Yeah.
a virologist. Yeah, he's a nerd. It's not his.
He's a nerd.
But whose place is it? Like, where?
I mean, I don't know. And there's a lot of conspiracy going on around that too. Have you guys heard of some of these Bill Gates conspiracy theories?
I have heard one conspiracy theory that's very interesting. The guy who won the Nobel Prize for discovering HIV said that the molecular structure of the virus was remarkably similar to HIV, as if the lab in Wuhan was trying to create an AIDS vaccine and did something really fucked up instead of actually doing just that. I don't think tinfoil hats don't exist anymore. There's no such thing. You can think anything you want. There's a possibility. I think it's true. But for sure, Bill Gates has his hand in government, and he will be benefiting himself before anybody else. You can be sure of that. He's not a philanthropist at all.
Well, and I was speaking with somebody earlier today who probably more agrees than disagrees with Bill Gates on vaccines, for example, but thinks that he's totally out of control when it comes to everything he's saying and promoting with, coronavirus. And the other thing is, people have been going back and forth on whether this is a big conspiracy and all these different conspiracies that people come up with. But what I think you look at is the convergence of so many different agendas on different levels all over the world, meeting and intersecting. And so you get messes like these when you have so many people making big decisions that influence a lot of people's lives that are very self-interest driven. And so when you have people over in a lab in China trying to make money and be important, and then you have American people that may have been involved in that and they're clamoring for this, and you have all these Democrat senators having like Chinese like spy staffers on the payroll of the American taxpayer.
I remember that.
Yeah. And so you have like on literally every single level so many problems, and so it's easy to like try and fill in the gaps of like, how does this all fit together? People are going to so many people are going to want to come up with something very easy, like, oh, it was 13 people in one room that decided this is how it's going to go. I don't really believe that, but I do think there are many people conspiring and many people that have bad agendas. And I think, especially when you look at a lot of the states that have a lot of problems going on, they tend to be more states that are run by Democrats. And I think you look at the power grabs by a lot of Democrat governors, I think it is fair to be alarmed about that. My fear with like some of the reopen messaging and narratives is that some people on that side of things have flung open the door and given space to the left to say that Republicans want you to die for the Dow, right? And nobody obviously wants that to happen. No one's actually promoting that, but I think it's important to talk about how, you know, we need to protect people's lives and livelihoods and take this issue of coronavirus seriously, because whether it was man-made or not man-made, which I mean, I think most people know where they stand on that, but it is a real thing that is affecting a lot of people, and so I think it's important to take that take that seriously too.
So they're going to be definitely have more cases. Then about the power grabs, yeah, that's something to be concerned about always. You know,
Gretchen Whitmer, I mean,
yeah,
has got to be the worst.
But getting on to like Georgia reopening, there will be a price to pay for that, and it will be terrible. It was, as I said, New York suffered double the number of cases that it should have if it had closed earlier. So, you know, catering to kind of a live free or die, which I believe in. I want to live free or die, but catering to that kind of sentiment in a situation where there is no such thing as private health. It's public health. As this is so aptly proven, there's only public health. That's why you have to care for everyone at a certain base level. And which is why I used to support the failed campaign of Bernie Sanders. But we also lack any sort of universal care. There are less hospital beds in the United States in 2020 than there were in 1975.
Oh my goodness. Because
somebody fucking decided that pills were more profitable than hospital beds. I went to the hospital one time in my life, thank God, knock on wood. I walked out of there barely able to walk. They don't have beds. You just don't have beds. That's why we can't, that's why everyone's fucking dying. We're not equipped. We have nothing for the public good. I believe in I'm a capitalist, not a crony capitalist. Like, I think people should compete. I think Bill Gates deserves 5 billion, not 50 billion.
Would it work, though, let's say, if you, instead of getting rid of the capitalism part in the crony capitalism, got rid of the crony part? In other words, made it way harder for businesses to be able to go hand in hand with the government as far as contracts, as far as subsidies go, and enable more of a free market system to flourish.
A free market is fantastic, as long as you don't price gouge, you know, and you know, don't charge $150 for a vial that somebody can get in India for 25 cents, and it takes 12 cents to manufacture. I mean,
right?
Totally for it. Let there be capitalism.
Jonathan,
Please.
What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of people see problems with, you know, let's just take like your average person, you know, like average selection of people. They are going to think that there are problems with socialized, completely socialized, universal, whatever, single payer healthcare, and then also be upset with their idea of what the free market is. But we do not have a free market healthcare system in the United States,
Exactly.
and we probably haven't for a very long time.
That's where the left and the right come together.
When you already have like a socialized system, I mean, maybe redesign it so that it's actually getting care to like a basic level of care to people, rather than this bizarre system that we have now. And also, a lot of people, unfortunately, like, I think when they talk about, you know, talk a big game about the free market, like, they really mean free market for themselves, but not for their competitors. And that is not free market capitalism.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, I tend to be more middle of the road on, you know, the political spectrum, but I tend to communicate very directly. And, you know, people will say, oh, well, you know, you're an aggressive, you know, spokesperson, whatever. But I tend to think that you really have to create a system that's going to, I mean, there's a difference between politics and governance, and there's a difference between socialism and like being a, you know, a Marxist and saying that our public health system needs to do a better job of actually providing public health. I don't think those are the same thing. It's also too, I mean, I think when you look at decisions being made, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, forgive me for the loud noise, but when you look at decisions that have to be made and you have to model and project, you know, there's risks and benefits to everything. And I don't think that people are willing to have the tough conversations that need to be had. Like, if we continue to keep the economy completely closed so that we don't put certain people at risk, but then by doing just a total lockdown, let's just say we like super lockdown, we stayed locked down for 2 years, who is going to die as a result of that? How many, you know, fathers are going to be lost to suicide? And so we don't have anybody actually crunching all these numbers and figuring it out and giving decision makers that are charged with these big decisions all of the information they need. And I look at it, you know, are you guys familiar with the trolley problem?
No,
and then
that?
the trolley and the trolley and the fat man. Yeah. So there's that whole idea of like, would you pull the lever to move the train to plow down the 3 people instead of the 1 person standing on the track? Or, well, I guess I said that totally backwards. Would you pull the lever?
It's still worked.
So guys,
yeah, and then there's the, you know, a lot of people are willing to pull the lever, and or they have most people have trouble deciding to do that, right? But they eventually, a lot of people in a room, if you do this ethics, you know, quiz or problem, whatever, a lot of people will pull that lever because they think it's better to kill 1 person than 3. But then when you go to the fat man and the trolley problem, people that were just willing to, you know, direct a train to smash down, you know, 1 person to save 3, you know, the fat man and the trolley problem is like the trolley's coming from behind you, there's a fat man standing next to you, and if you push this fat man off the ledge, then he will stop the train and the 3 people down further on the track will be safe. The same people that were just willing to pull a lever and kill the 1 person can't find it in themselves to push the same person, right? So there's all these different like ethical dilemmas that people face, and I think, you know, handling a pandemic kind of follows these same sort of, you know, problems. It's like, are you, you know, and leaders are not, I think a lot of leaders are scared of making decisions. I think, you know, I started this Reopen America project to, you know, get lawmakers in different states, primarily Western states, to have these conversations about how to reopen and how to save lives and livelihoods. And, you know, some people in my conversations in all these different states, some Democrats, some Republicans, there's a real hesitancy to come out really and even communicate. I think a lot of people are disappointed with how
by the way,
quiet
Jonathan,
a lot of their lawmakers
speaking
are.
Speaking of hesitance, I'm sorry to cut you off short. We have 2 more people coming in here to take part of the conversation, and I would love to have a conversation with you and them and see what they say. So we are bringing in the journalist Laura Tagg, and we are bringing in my friend John Chavez. So let's bring in John right now. Here we go. John Chavez, friend of mine. I've known him for a pretty long time. He is, let's see, he is gone right now for some reason. Let's see what's going on there. Here we go.
There
John is an amazing writer. Can you hear us, John? John is an amazing writer on books about DMT and breathing and being able to secrete your own psychedelic compounds, which I'm really, really fascinated by. I've been doing it myself. John, buddy, how are you doing? Can you hear us?
Hey, John. He just turned it off. Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, there we go.
Excellent.
There we go.
Now we're cooking with gas.
So, John, you've been listening to us speak here. What are your thoughts?
I think it's good points all around. I think that, you know, one of the things that I wanted to bring up was the perception of vaccines. And I think most adults in this country, in America, they're more familiar with the flu vaccine. I mean, that's really what's kind of pushed out every year. And one of the things that I was looking at is, you know, the flu vaccine's been around since the 40s, so almost about 80 years. And the CDC itself admits to having about a 50% effectiveness rate on average. So on a good year, it'll be high 50s. On a bad year, it'll be in the 30s. And I think that's an issue in terms of the perception of vaccines. If you get what I'm saying, it's the perception of the flu vaccine. It's like you guys have had 80 years to work on a vaccine and get it right, but why are you guys still hovering around 50% effectiveness rate? And when it comes to something like the coronavirus, is like, this is new. What makes it okay, or what makes us believe to have the faith that this thing is actually going to work when you guys have had so many years to work on a flu vaccine? So that's kind of my interest, is the perception of vaccines, not necessarily the science behind it, but just the marketing and the perception of how they work, or if they work at all.
I would say polio, rubella.
So before we go any further, I wanted to introduce my friend Laura Tagliani. So Laura is a wonderful journalist, and I am so happy to have her here with us, and I am very curious about your thoughts on this conversation so far.
I think the conversation's been really interesting. As a journalist, like, I'm not a scientist, but for me, it's the difficulty of believing in facts that I find with the vaccine debate. Like, there's so many of these things that have been debunked, or just like so much of the rationale behind people who are against vaccinating. It's very interesting for me to see like what type of science they would accept necessarily if everything we have now isn't enough. I mean, the reason the flu vaccine isn't effective every year is because there are different strains. So they're giving you a vaccine for one flu. And if that's not the one that you get, you're going to get the flu.
Well, they usually give you multiple strains, right? I mean, that's really what we're getting every year, is a vaccine that contains for multiple strains, and we're hoping that they match up.
But that's why that won't work. Like, that's why the fact that the flu vaccine doesn't work doesn't mean that the immunization for COVID will work the same way, because there aren't as many strains of COVID as there are the seasonal flu.
That may not be true, but because it is mutating wildly. But there is a fact that the polio vaccine worked, the measles vaccine worked, rubella worked. Yeah, it can work 100%. For sure. I wouldn't have a doubt about the efficacy of it could be total. Let's hope it is. Well, so I wouldn't doubt it before it's arrived, basically.
Well, the big worry for me is that if we're going to have to wait 2 years or more to find out if people are going to have some side effects from this COVID-19 vaccine. My mom's got MS, and she's already in the danger zone as far as people who can get this coronavirus and have a really bad reaction. But all the more so, I don't want her to take something that would have a bad reaction 2 years from now, especially if this is rushed. So, Jonathan, I know that in the last video that you did with Jules, you talked a lot about certain harmful effects that you have noticed that vaccines have, especially in children. So I'm curious whether you, what your thoughts are on the potential danger of certain things coming about 2 years from now, even after the tests have been done.
Well, for one, I mean, people act like, they just toss around this word anti-vaxxer. Majority of the families that I met who were fighting against different mandates across the country, they were not anti-vaccine at all. In fact, their kids had the vaccines and then had issues immediately or soon thereafter. And so, the whole trope of what kind of science would you guys accept? It's like, what science will anyone that is pushing vaccines accept that doesn't prove them correct? None. And all of these studies
There's a study in Denmark with over 600,000 kids from 1999.
Who funded that study? Who funded that study? And what study are you talking about?
Well, I'm trying to find the name of I'll find you the name, continue.
Well,
but the thing is like, the funding of these things matter, and people like Dorit are paid to push and promote vaccines. And the fact is that there is, in 1986, the 1986 Act that was passed, it was mandated that safety reports are given to Congress every 2 years, including the first year, which was the year I was born, 1988, was the first year that a safety report was due to Congress. And not only was it not done that year, it has not ever been done since. And so when we don't have the certain types of safety studies and safety reports and really investigate these issues that people report, and the lack of, there was a Harvard study that showed that less than 1% of adverse events are even reported, then there's, there's plenty of science and scientists there are plenty of scientists who have laid it out, like this is exactly how. People like Judy Mikovits, who has talked about this, Mary Holland, there's her book on HPV. You could easily ask anyone that's promoting vaccines if they've read that book, and they'll all say no, all of them. So anyone that's promoting and pushing vaccines literally refuses to actually look at studies and read books that shows the exact opposite is true of what they're stating, and they won't do it. Whereas majority of these so-called anti-vaxxers have read it all. And like I said earlier in the conversation, it's like you have Ivy League and top educated, lawyers, doctors across the board saying all these different things, and they're just like, shushed and labeled as an anti-vaxxer. And there's actually been hate crimes against people, and the kinds of things that you can read that are said to these moms is just horrifying. And people say, oh, well, it's rare. It's like, okay, well, are you acknowledging that at least a portion of these injuries and deaths are real?
Jonathan.
And then you just get this like blank look, and then you say, okay, well, what should we do for those? If we're sacrificing them for the greater good, when are we ever going to honor the sacrifices made by families who are the sacrificial lambs? Why aren't they acknowledged, and why aren't they honored?
Well, in the conversation that we had with Jules, I remember you were pointing out how there were these girls who had a seizure come on, but that seizure was not listed in the CDC as one of the things that would have an exemption. And this was a document that I found from the CDC's website. So that is something that, regardless, could have happened with the doctor, where the doctor could have stepped in and said, you know what, forget this bureaucratic nonsense, I'm going to exempt you. Because if a girl has this seizure in her childhood, but it's not like enough seizures, it's not like it was listed there a persistent seizure, I think that may be a problem. So I think that there may be some middle ground here. But
there is.
Can I jump in for a second on your behalf, Jonathan? And I do think that people do not take into serious consideration the concerns of people who have, let's not say anti-vaxxers, but reservations with vaccinations. The reason that they haven't done that mandated testing since '86 is because it would open up the insurance companies and the pharmaceuticals to massive possible lawsuits. And
which tells you what?
Which tells me the system is fucked and broken. It doesn't tell me anything about the general efficacy of vaccines. They fucking work. They've worked for hundreds of years. Thank God for Jonas Salk. But also the point you're making, I'm coming back to that. Yes, we should be prudent about developing a coronavirus vaccine. Of course we should. Of course. And we should also absolutely, address those concerns of people in communities who may have gotten, autism or whatever side effect. There are side effects.
Autism
there are things that go wrong.
Laura?
If there are side effects, autism is not one.
How do you say so definitively?
Because there was a study done funded by the Danish Ministry of Health with over 600,000 kids, strongly supporting that the MMR vaccine does not increase the risk of autism. They're getting vaccinated at a time when they would have been diagnosed with autism. So families are looking back and creating this link. Anecdotal evidence doesn't prove anything. These studies also now, and if they say that there's been increased cases of autism with vaccination, there's also been an increase in like the way that we diagnose autism. There is no link between autism. The only study, Wakefield study, was retracted from the Lancet, which was the only study that had.
I know that. That was back in 1988. This is the point you're kind of making here. Where, but I don't necessarily believe that, at the same time. I don't necessarily believe that at all.
I
So
mean, it's your gut reaction to a scientific study showing there's no link.
it's not a gut reaction.
I mean, like you can't not believe in that. Like that's not how that exists.
I can because you're studying one study, and you're studying a very
every study has failed to show
600,000
between autism.
Jonathan, step in here. What do you think?
Jonathan, go for it.
I mean, you will never find anyone except, well, a study proof that it does. So I could come up with 100,000 studies that proves autism has been, created. So if you take, for example, is anyone familiar with Pandas or Pans? Pans is, it's a psychiatric autoimmune disorder. And basically, your brain feels like it's on fire. That is a side effect of vaccines. And it's recognized in Oregon. I think there's 4 doctors that can treat children with Pandas or Pans. The Oregon legislature decided to give a day of recognition to children who suffer from Pandas and Pans, which they would be able to celebrate a month after they got kicked out of school for not getting vaccines, despite the fact their doctors don't want them to have it. In Oregon, for example, and it's like Colorado and California at different points in time, you can get a so-called non-medical exemption. Well, what is a non-medical exemption? It's not some like hippie writing it for you in a yurt. It is a doctor telling you to go get the religious exemption because they think that your child should have an exemption, and they don't want to put their name on it because they don't want a dot site on their forehead by pharma-captured state agencies like the so-called ministries of health that are basically filled and stacked with the political donors or people tied politically well connected to politicians who get to make the decisions of who gets those appointments. And it's a big money racket. So if the government says, oh, well, this is fine and dandy because, well, we're the government and we said so, and we had a bunch of so-called public health workers, they're actually former psychiatrists, linked psychiatry profiting, pharmaceutical drug reps, all of these things, making healthcare decisions. Those are not doctors. Those are not medical physicians. Those are people that profit off of drugs. And so they're basically, it's like a bunch of white coats making decisions for everyone. And so when you have a state legislature like Oregon's legislature decide to give a day of recognition to children who have like their head is on fire, brain is on fire, and they're smacking their heads against the wall in their homes, and it's breaking apart marriages because it's a very stressful home to be in when you have a kid that is suffering with such a serious issue and you're not getting the help that you need. Like homes are really suffering under this. And is it some mega number, like 40% of people? No. But there's also no study has been done to study how the vaccines all work with each other.
Jonathan,
and I think if people really studied the way that vaccines are made, looking at aborted fetal cells, like they're to just wipe off and say, well, there's
that was originally how vaccines were discovered. That's originally how vaccines were made. There hasn't been like anything remotely close to an aborted fetal cell, which is it was stem cells.
Jonathan, do you have one study? I'm honestly curious that actually like a scientific study, I don't care where it's from, but one that's repeatable and has all the facets that you need to, have a valid study that links a specific vaccine to autism?
I can reach out to somebody who can get you a few studies that relate to that. I know.
Gotta do it now, man. We're on the air.
I looked up who funded my study.
Yeah. No, you want to is there one study you can cite right now? Like there's no, you can't put off these questions. It's here and it's now. My accountant is calling. Do you have one that shows a link? If you do, you have my, attention. But until you do, anecdotes.
Listen, I have never decided to get stuck on the whole autism thing. I am not. That has not been my focus of what I've done.
So let's skip the autism for now. What I'm
I'm
curious about
not an expert on autism, and frankly, I don't. It is not my position that it has to cause autism.
But see, I'm not an expert on autism either. I'm not an expert on any of these things, which is precisely why I look at a study. No, I'm not. I can't decide that what the scientific community accepts as true is not, because I don't have the qualifications to do so. And no individual scientist does. If the overwhelming amount of evidence in the scientific community is one thing, that's what it is.
Well, Laura posted a really great post on her Instagram, how to counter the circus of pseudoscience. So I could definitely understand that we have to be on our guard for pseudoscience. What I'm curious about here is, Laura, what do you think of Jonathan's point as far as that there are going to be these people out there like those little girls who have these problems, and bureaucratic glut prevents those problems from being addressed by doctors?
Well, you can get exempt from getting vaccinated, right? And that's exactly for whom everybody else needs to get vaccinated for. Like, that's the reason. It isn't
Where
just
can you
a
get
personal
exemptions?
choice. In New York, they exempted all of the Orthodox Jewish community, which is how we ended up with measles last year.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, we had a measles outbreak in New York last year in the Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn.
Measles happen. Wow.
But if we're talking about something like that CDC study, which I would also like to put up later, that one did have a list of things that were not considered to be exemptions, and one of those, unfortunately, was this case of seizure, which is like not a continuous seizure. So if it's a continuous seizure, and I'm not really sure how that would be proven, then that could be exempt. But if it's like shorter than that, like if it's like one seizure or something, then that cannot be exempt. And those are like the bureaucratic loopholes that I'd be concerned about. Like, I don't know, Jonathan, am I making sense here?
It's because these are.
I mean, anyone can go and look at a vaccine insert. I mean, it doesn't matter if I have like some, globalist, super rich funded, study to prove what I'm saying. Like,
but this
read the
was
vaccine
funded,
insert.
the study that I cited was funded by the Danish.
Yeah,
board.
have you read a vaccine insert lists like all of these things as side effects?
There are side effects.
But people act like there's not, and then as soon as somebody says I had a side effect, they're like, no.
Yeah, that's because they're afraid.
You look at like psychiatry. You take psych drugs.
Yeah.
We all know that people go and are mass shooters on all these psych drugs, and no one will even look at that either. Like, we have the whole
liability that the
psychiatric
pharmaceuticals would suffer. I think we shouldn't do the testing because they would suffer so much liability if any side effects actually came up. That's a joke, by the way. but you are right. If they should test for side effects.
But they do test for side effects. They're not testing for side effects.
I believe him.
Side effect is from a low.
All right. So people that have side effects happen. Like, has there been stories about the profiles on the people that had the side effects? Do they get as much news coverage as all of the people saying, "Oh, vaccines don't cause autism, therefore
like
they don't."
bad.
Let's see.
Proportional amount of news coverage.
There's a couple of things I want to show you guys, so I'm going to share my lower screen over here. 1 second. So
yeah,
here we go. This is gonna be interesting.
Let's do it.
Yes. So
lower screen action.
Okay, so first off, here is Laura's Instagram, and here is her piece, "How to Counter the Circus of Pseudoscience." I'm not sure if it's actually seen on the screen.
I didn't write that.
Oh, wrong screen. Okay, let me change that. 1 second.
I wish I had.
Green sunglasses.
Stop share. Yeah, I don't know why that happened. Let me see. Share screen. Now I'm going to do the right one. Here we go.
Was fascinating.
Okay, do you guys see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, how to counter the circus of pseudoscience. And then there is another screen after that I wanted to show you guys, the contradictions and precautions. So it says over here, vaccines may be given under these conditions. And this is from the video we did with Jonathan. So you see over here, history of seizure, less than 3 days after receiving a previous dose. So I'm actually not sure if this is appearing on our live stream, so I'm going to cancel it and try to show it off in a different way. But this is what I wanted to share with you guys, so you guys could see the potential dangers that could be addressed in maybe a more balanced way. I don't know, Laura, I'm curious, like this CDC...
But probability is quite low, right? That's really the thing.
It's less than 1 in a million. And this seizure, the Pfizer, whatever the name of the seizures are, the short-lasting seizures are a response. It's from having a fever. So any fever can cause that in children, especially under 5. And vaccines, because it stimulates your immune response, you get like a small fever probably after you're vaccinated, because it's like your body doing like a warm up, right, game.
Right. Yeah, no, that's clear.
So I don't know, Jonathan, what do you think of all this? Because I showed the chart of the CDC.
Brady Bunch.
Like that one, I'm not sure how many people are going to have these history of seizures, so that this would potentially lead to, let's say, other people creating exceptions and causing a mass breakout of measles or something else. Because it's like, it is an unfortunate thing, right? Like, we got to balance things out here. As far as, do we want way more people to get infected with things that have been cured a long time ago for the sake of there being certain times when children are going to have problems? Like, where is the right balance here?
I think there will never be any balance until people actually recognize the fact that there are a lot of people who have been killed and hurt by vaccines, psychotropic drugs, and people, just are unwilling to recognize that fact. And it's like, oh, 1 in a million. Well, who has the stats, and like, how is that 1 in a million? Or people say 99%. And by the way, with like herd immunity, the people that, wouldn't shut up about herd immunity during the vaccine wars of the legislatures across the country last year, are all of a sudden turning around now and are not a fan of herd immunity.
That's not true. They're a fan of herd immunity as acquired through vaccines, because the risk of having a vaccine injury is so low. But to get herd immunity through COVID, the risk is way too high to like act. That's why they're telling you not to have chickenpox parties. It's the same people telling you not to have chickenpox parties or telling you not to have COVID parties to gain immunity that way.
Jillian, what do you think? And I'm going to start bringing in new people on after your comment.
What do you think? Am I looking towards you on the screen? Can you see that?
Yeah,
like everyone should turn towards Jillian.
Hello, everyone.
Hello,
yes.
Like right now. Yeah. You have to look up and you have to look sideways.
Yeah, no, I guess what I'm really hearing here is, yeah, the probability is very low. And so I guess my question for Laura is just, we all know the probability is very low, but I do think as far as news coverage goes and everything like that is concerned, we don't really hear about side effects. I mean, we've already agreed that there are side effects, but I think
there are not side effects. We didn't agree there are side effects.
I thought we did agree. Did we not just agree with that with Jonathan, that there are side effects?
No. Like,
Okay.
unfortunately, there's side effects of the vaccine. I think the only side effect of a vaccine is like a fever after.
And you think, and that's just for
the companies themselves.
What's everyone?
I don't think you want to be such an evangelist on this, Laura. I really don't, because you have to be respectful. There are side effects for every medication from aspirin on down. You can't just dismiss people like that. Drug companies should do their diligence, and they should be careful, and they should do their studies, as Jonathan said, from '86. But I wouldn't dismiss they're completely harmless with like statements like that, because they're just not true.
No, because
every medication there is a side effect. But people don't want to say anything politically about it because they're scared that people go out and stop getting vaccines. So it's a political decision not to tell the truth,
so it's
which might be valid.
The proponents of the 19.
It may
Laura,
be. I don't know.
Laura, do you know what the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act is?
No.
Okay, there's your first problem, because you're promoting vaccines without even understanding the regulatory and legal framework around the vaccine regime in America. So there are side effects. Congress recognized that there are side effects, and the pharmaceutical drug companies recognize there are side effects. And in the memo, that was pushed out to promote the law to get passed, recognized and said that, what?
Yeah, will you explain the act?
Yeah, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act recognized that vaccine injury was a serious issue and that it wasn't adequately addressed. And because of these problems, they decided they needed to give a liability shield to the pharmaceutical drug companies.
And if you go to, this was right. This was '86.
Yeah. And really, Laura, I think you need to go through, and you can go to consciencecoalition.com/study. They have all of the documents that you need to like really understand the 1986 Act. And Sotomayor and RBG sided with the so-called anti-vaxxers against the majority ruling that upheld the law. And so when you look at when you go on consciencecoalition.com/study, there's a PDF download for the memo that was used to promote the bill in Congress. And in that memo, on I think page 5 or 6, there's a whole thing about how people were not taking the deaths related to one or more of the vaccines seriously enough. It specifically named one of them. And it's like, if that was the case then, you have people now. I mean, no one should be talking about vaccines and vaccine policy without understanding what the law is and what the government has recognized. And the government does not agree that there's no side effects, and pharmaceutical drug companies themselves don't agree with that statement. So I think the advice to not be an evangelist for, you know, unhinged vaccine policy and promotion is wise, because it is a serious issue.
Bill Maher was talking about this on his show. Is my microphone working?
Yes, and
Yeah,
Jules Hamilton is finally with us.
Jules!
Yo.
What's up, Jules? What's up?
Stop.
I was enjoying chatting in the little chat room here and listening to the conversation. This is a really interesting subject to me, because the uncertainty in science and how consensus works, I think, is really important. I think we do have a very scientifically illiterate society for the most part, and we're increasingly more and more dependent on science to thrive in the modern world. I'm pro-vaccine, but I don't think they should be mandatory, right? I think that's a lot of the big problem. So when I was talking to Lockwood on our Sowing Discourse, that's where I was coming from in terms of, if a private institution says you're not allowed in the building without a vaccine, I think that's cool. But if you have some kind of state mandated required vaccine, I think you're in very slippery slope territory. But I did want to focus on Laura Tagg's post.
Can I comment on that a second? Because I think that is so wrong in every way. Because a person who has not gotten vaccinated against fucking polio or measles or what have you, should they go on the New York City subway, fuck them.
We just saw this with COVID.
This is the most ridiculous position you could possibly take. If a vaccine comes up for COVID that is, in Jonathan's view, safe, because he's here, and it's shown, because Laura will believe in the study, to be 100% or 98% effective, they should not get on the fucking subway with my ass ever. Like, why? Why would you say something?
So you can say something like, you're not allowed on the subway without a vaccine. The problem with the way you would have to write the law to require this, to require people to get a vaccine, you are giving the state the authority to unilaterally decide when they're going to inject you with whatever it is.
It's
and
better
if
than
that
giving
vaccine
you the
is
right to
if that vaccine is a
inject
cocktail, if that vaccine is a cocktail with purposes, you have no recourse, right? Here's the problem.
Neither the person.
I think it's fine. Listen, I think it's fine if you have a nursing home. If you have a nursing home and it says you're not allowed in this building if you don't have a flu vaccine, that's fine, right? Show us a certificate. If you don't have a certificate that shows you were vaccinated, you're not allowed in the building. If you want to debate, you're not allowed to use public transportation without a certificate, right? You're no longer allowed to buy a Metro card without a certificate. Personally, I think that's problematic. But if that's how you want to debate it, I think
that's insane. Why would you let somebody on a crowded subway car who could have 100% vaccine or 99.9 onto a public system? You're right to.
I think you should have the freedom. I think you should have the morphological
freedom to infect me with your bullshit. That's what I'm saying.
But also, I think measles lacked in the air for
my house. You know, it's not. It's
right. So what did I say that was problematic to you?
It's not problematic. We're having a debate.
I know. So I just want to make sure I know what the contention is. But I think I'm misunderstanding you.
My intention is to blow away conceptions like, you know, that I as an individual have every right to do whatever the fuck I want. So you know, so you don't have the right, if you have a coronavirus and you know it, to go onto a crowded subway car. I call that manslaughter, murder. I call that fucking irresponsibility. If there's a vaccine, you should be mandated to take it. You can stay in your apartment and die. That's fine. Tuberculosis back in the 19th century claimed everyone. It was far more virulent than coronavirus. If there was a vaccine for that, everyone would have taken it. There's something called private, there's something called public. We need to know the fucking balance between the two. We can't have people walking into crowded public spaces who can infect other people. Your right not to get injected is not your right for you to infect me. Forget it.
And isn't what I said, didn't what I say accommodate your concern?
No, because you said a private nursing home. We're talking about the public space.
Private
So forgive my poverty of language here. I'm saying no. So let me. No, because it matters, right? It doesn't matter what you say. It matters what people hear, right? It doesn't matter what you mean. It matters what people interpret. So that's our problem here.
Whenever Jules says that,
does matter.
Okay, but also you don't have, it's not your right to live in like a crowded metropolis though. So if you are going to be someone, it doesn't work to say you can't go into a restaurant. You can get these things like walking behind someone on the street. So like you're giving up certain freedoms to have other luxuries, to like live in a society like this. So like you have to give up your freedom, some freedoms, for the luxuries and protections. It's a contract.
I found it.
Enter into to be a citizen.
I'm curious to hear what Jonathan thinks about all of this.
Jonathan.
If you want to leave it up to state rights.
Wait.
He muted his microphone by accident. He muted his microphone by accident. But if you want to leave it up to state rights, I think that's fine. My position was, if you're going to federally...
Jonathan, your thoughts?
Well, one thing that came to mind when I was just listening to that last segment is that, you know, in California, it's the Democrats and the governor are going to scream bloody murder if you walk out of your house without some, you know, like I said earlier, ratty ass t-shirt around your face. But they also decriminalized knowingly infecting someone with HIV. So none of these people seem to be very like policy masterminds. And also, when you get certain vaccines, some of them shed. My understanding is that if they have a live virus, you know, in them, and you get injected with it, then you can't, you really shouldn't be out in public, and you should not be around anyone who's vulnerable, because you're actually shedding that virus. And I think like hepatitis A is one of those. I think actually the measles vaccine is as well. And something too, like, you know, the measles outbreaks that are used to push vaccines and take away medical exemptions and medically needed and necessary exemptions, public health departments, the so holy public health departments, would not release the strain data. So they wouldn't release whether it was wild measles that you cannot vaccinate against or do anything about with a vaccine, and there is no vaccine for it, or if it was the strain that can be vaccinated for it, and no one explained whether it was actually caused by somebody with the vaccine. And a lot of these...
Somebody traveling from Israel, they did contact tracing, the health department. It came from Israel, and that's why it went to the Orthodox communities in New York. That's how we got the measles outbreaks last year.
Yeah, but did anybody figure out how that person contracted measles?
In Israel, there was an outbreak in Israel.
They don't do vaccines within the Orthodox
Israel to here.
So was it the wild strain of measles, or was it the strain that can be vaccinated against?
I'm looking up.
Yeah, because like when I was in the legislature, I requested from the Oregon Health Authority data on whether it was in the outbreak that was in Oregon was caused by wild measles or the vaccine strain measles, and they would not disclose that information. And how a public health department doesn't have to disclose that to the legislature makes no sense to me at all. But I just think that, you know, no one is really looking at all of these different things and digging deeper than, you know, accepting at face value, like, oh, well, it was caused by this or it was caused by that. It's like, okay, well, let's unpack that even further. Because you could have an outbreak that was started by a vaccine injection. If somebody received a vaccine that happens to shed, and then somebody contracted it from the shedded virus, that's actually the vaccine that caused the outbreak. Does anyone in that world have any interest in helping promote and publicize that information? I highly doubt that they would. And that's probably why we get things like public health departments not giving, information to people in the legislature. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, that's body politic, right? Is you start thinking about people as statistics. So that's where you get into some of these Malthusian trolley problems, where you're not thinking in terms of individual freedoms, you're thinking in terms of, abstracts. So this is why I think you need to decentralize these initiatives. What I was saying before about alternatives to a federal mandate, where if you have a central position and you say, okay, this is the policy, now all 50 states have to implement this exactly the same. You're shaking your head, but you're wrong, right? If you have a federal mandate and you make all the states do the same exact thing, you're going to open yourself up to a lot more problems and injustice. And also you create the legal precedent for the slippery slope of giving the government the authority to create any kind of cocktail which they determine is for everyone's safety. Because your intentions don't matter as much as the effects of your actions, right? Good intentions aren't good enough. Right. So when I said a private institution wants to bar you without a certificate, I was really trying to isolate all institutions, public or private. Right. The fact I was not distinguishing between public or private. I was saying, if you want to say you're not allowed in this place without a certificate, or you're not allowed in this place, then people have their own discretion. But if you're saying, I want to take away people's ability to use discretion, it's an immoral position.
Okay. Well, Jules, you have your wish. You already do, because the United States has no unified position. And
right now it's the states. Yeah.
Hang on.
So Trump left it up to the states.
As I was saying,
it's how it's
up to
supposed
the
to be.
states. And we are now, with your strategy implemented, we're not only the worst state in the nation, New York, we are the worst country in the world, save for China. And we're adopting your position.
We got Cuomo.
No position at all. You don't have a position. No. You don't have a plan. You just say, do what you fucking want. It's my right to infect. I don't have to inject. Whatever, dude. It doesn't
I think that's
work.
A gross distortion of what I said.
No, it's a comical distortion of what you said.
No.
But it still gets to the heart of what you're saying. And it does so, and I think you understand that.
The reason why you have Bill Maher, Bill Maher of all people, acknowledging John's.
Yes, Bill Maher is correct.
Specific points.
Jonathan is correct too. I think he just has bad timing to be getting into the nuances of vaccines, because
you want to have multiple people making different vaccines. If there are other ways to cure this, you want other people developing therapies to cure this.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
So the way you do that is you use common sense laws, right? You inform people, because you know what people value the most? Their lives. Right? People value their lives the most.
Mean, man. Of course they do. That's not an argument.
So
we
it's
got
like
a comment.
saying.
By the way, guys, we got a comment.
We got a
from,
comment.
Ryan R. Wappin. If vaccines became mandatory, the pushback would be legendary.
Not.
Why don't we just start injecting people with soma? Why don't we just start injecting people with soma? The point is if you give the government the authority, give the government the authority to medicate you,
yes,
for your own good and for the good of people around you, the legal precedent is the same for medicating you with anything. And what they used to do in the USSR, if you were acting crazy, they'd pump you full of drugs and they would throw you in the asylum.
I get your dystopian argument.
No, it's not a dystopian argument. It's a game argument. We're playing a game against the future 1984. And if you're going to be penny wise and pound foolish, you deserve what you get.
I'm not going to get anything.
This is
You're
actually a
gonna
true
get
story.
affected. I'll
what
be
Jules
fine.
is talking about is absolutely the
Yeah,
fact.
you'll be fine, hopefully, because other Americans will be debating and having public discussions like this.
Public discussions are necessary, and debate is necessary. Absolutely. There's no disagreement on that. I totally agree with you. What I'm saying is that if they come up with something that you agree with and Jonathan agrees with, that looks like it's 99% accurate, I think it should be mandatory.
We should be hundreds of years more advanced with medical technology than we are today. And it's because we have not decentralized these systems. It's because we have not crushed the price. No, we have not. The prices are artificially expensive.
Different groups.
Monopolies are apocryphal. We have artificially expensive medical. We have an artificially expensive medical system. If you got rid of the FDA,
I agree.
Crush the prices, you would open up competition, and then you give people the right to try. There are experimental therapies where you could say, I want to give that a try. It's illegal for you to even try, right?
No,
and that slows down science. Science, you need data. If you slow down the ability to accumulate data, you are stunting science and progress.
Oh, wait,
I want to know what Laura was going to say. I think she had a point.
I just think that would open it up to like bad science, and like that's how you would end.
What is bad science? Science is a tool to navigate uncertainty.
Yeah, but if you
it's all conjectures and refutations.
Had somebody like trying to create some sort of immunity thing and giving themselves a disease, and they would give it to everyone. Like you can't just have people doing like.
Laura, people have done that. Scientists.
Yes, you can. You can do that. That's what you should do.
Of course they have, but we should.
Great men have taken chances like that. I don't think it should be regulated to 5 or 6 pharma companies. I mean, I agree with Jules.
But it's not regulated to 5 or 6 pharma companies. Martine Rothblatt, who started Sirius XM Radio, her child.
I work for Sirius. Yeah, I know.
Her child had a disease that previously had not been cured, so she went out and she found the cure and started a drug company, and now she's the highest female CEO in America.
Good for her.
Okay, so it's not regulated to the point that only you can go out and do it if you're fucking smart enough to figure out how to make money, and if you're not,
if you have the funds too,
meddling in that.
If you have the funds, and the connections,
from nowhere.
Why not? Why not? He doesn't need a license.
Went and raised the money to start this, and now it's one of the highest grossing treatments. Is from I can't remember what it is. It's a lung disease.
Laura,
I know what you're talking about. I can.
Jules and Jonathan are saying is there's a lot of corruption within the healthcare industry. Which we know there is, right? And we know
you are allowed to go out and do your own thing. Like
you
are. Those people just aren't smart enough to do it. And for the people who aren't smart enough to figure out how to get the funding presented and whatever, like I don't really want that.
They're not smart enough. They're not connected enough.
Martine Rothblatt.
You have a fucking meritocracy like that is a sham. That's why
guys, here's an example, by the way, of how it could also
then you have
go
things
wrong
like Theranos, right? If we just let everything.
Here's an example, guys. Here's an example.
So she was under Laura's, thing, like, Elizabeth Holmes, like, is smarter than somebody that is, from a modest family in the Midwest who doesn't have all the connections to this and that and everybody else, like in Silicon Valley and mommy and daddy's money here and there and all these different trusts and whatever. I think that the ability to raise capital is not like a single metric that we should use to judge people's merit for starting something. And there are barriers to entry for budding entrepreneurs and people who may have a really smart idea. And I think bringing more competition into the free market's definitely needed.
By the way, just so you guys are aware, Martine Rothblatt's daughter, the illness is pulmonary arterial hypertension. Just so you guys know.
And also I wanted to let you guys know that there is an article that I put on the screen right now from the New York Times. Johnson & Johnson recalls baby powder over asbestos worry. So even the biggest companies are able to get away with a lot of horrible side effects. So whether it's like a startup or a giant company, it doesn't really matter to me.
This is why the FDA is a big silent killer, right? Because the FDA is more worried about negative press. So they will delay progress everywhere to a suicidal degree, right? Just to avoid one drug slipping through that has a negative side effect. But if you had a Yelp, or if you had a biohacking community where you had people live, decentralized, doing tests, uploading their data, people can check the conjectures and refutations, they can see if they can replicate the studies or not, you would accelerate progress. You would also crush prices. This false sense of security from depending on like credentialed authorities it's an imaginary security, right? And it shows right now the fact that you can't make masks, right? Because the FDA says you have to like do it this specific way. It's suicidal.
It's not the FDA, man. We gave up all our manufacturing to Mexico and China. It has nothing to do with the FDA.
Yeah, why do we have all our like essential, like life dependent manufacturing overseas? Like the second things hit the fan and suddenly it's like
because of NAFTA, because it began with
90% of our medicine is made in China. That's really smart.
Well, that's what we did. We outsourced everything so that we could be a service economy. And now we can't manufacture a fucking mask because it has nothing to do with FDA guidelines, man.
It does. No, it absolutely has to do with FDA guidelines. No, 100%. No, 100%.
Jules, we don't have any manufacturing plants. It's over. It's
no,
gone.
But if other people wanted to do it, like if Walmart said, hey, tomorrow we're doing it, the FDA would say, no, you can't.
No, they wouldn't.
Yes, that was happening. I was reading these articles. Wrong. You're just talking out of your ass.
No, you're talking out of your ass.
I'm not.
Right now, if you say that about me.
No, people will look this up.
Don't get into back and forth with me. It's not going to work out well. Totally. What I'm saying to you is this. This is uncontestable. We have outsourced all our manufacturing overseas, almost all of it. That's why Trump got elected, okay? Because of NAFTA and CAFTA and all these kind of things. We don't manufacture anything anymore. You're imagining the FDA is setting up barriers to factories.
I'm not. These are stories. You can read these stories.
I could read 1,000 stories, but the main reason—
If someone with manufacturing plants, let's say I know someone with
manufacturing plants. There are no manufacturing plant. What do we manufacture here?
We manufacture clothes. We manufacture everything, just not on a scale for 270 whatever million people.
Seriously, what do we manufacture here?
We manufacture a little bit of everything here. Just not enough for scale.
Everything. We don't have the capacity to make masks. Otherwise,
that's what I'm saying.
But also because nobody.
But if you needed to shift, like if you enter a wartime economy, you need to shift.
Jules, Laura's got something to say.
Let's hear what Laura has to say. Yeah.
But the reason that we exported everything is to bring the price down because Americans here don't want to do those jobs. Like right now
That's not true. There are fucking millions of Americans out of work. They want to do those jobs.
Okay, so in the UK, people don't want to pick the berries aren't being picked because they can't bring in the Eastern European workers.
No, because they don't want to pay $15 an hour.
They tried to hire British workers and 15% of them showed up on the first day of work. Like these manufacturing jobs and like if you see what they look like working in China, putting one part, like this is why we had after the Industrial Revolution, that was like this disconnect. Yeah. Nobody wants to do those jobs here.
Yes, they do. There are 40 fucking million people out of work. Stop it. It's not true.
I don't think they want to do the jobs and pay.
They do.
And get paid the amount to keep
the unemployed people in Michigan. Talk to Trump's voters.
Wait, one at a time. Guys, one at a time. Jillian, you go first, then Laura, then Daniel.
Yes. No, sorry, guys. No, I just think I think it's probably more of a wage issue too. I think people are willing to do the jobs. I just don't think they want to do it for the amount they're getting.
An iPhone would cost $7,000 if it was made in the U.S.
Yeah.
It would cost a little more. Right now there are 50 million people out of work. Stop it, guys. Seriously. We need those fucking jobs. People in Michigan and Wisconsin, this kind of attitude gave this kind of attitude gave the election to Trump. Everyone in those states were alienated.
But everybody,
I know debate about this.
That's a good point.
You know?
I agree they were alienated, but this isn't how. Like they don't want. In the UK, they opened up these berry picking jobs to people in the UK who were out of work, and none of them took them.
In the UK, this is the USA.
Yeah,
We're
do you
not
see
talking
what
about.
the factories look like in China? You think Americans want to have those
Yes,
jobs?
they would do it for $15 an hour. Yes, they would
They're
work
not.
it.
They're paying them like $2 an hour less.
I know, but they shouldn't be allowed to. That's
I know, but
corporatism.
Why
that's
not?
how this
Yeah.
Dude,
bring down.
Yeah, I
oh
know.
my God, we're gonna have to do this again.
Why not? Because it's not a fucking living wage, and I don't want anyone fucking working 40 hours and not being able to afford healthcare.
We're gonna get into this.
Because I believe in, yes, we are, Jules. You and I. Let's go on a fucking that one.
I agree with Laura. I don't think that Americans want to do those jobs.
Oh, bullshit, man. They're all out of work. What are you talking about?
I don't want to do that
You
job.
have a 40% unemployment rate right now. People will do anything. They haven't gotten their $1,200 yet. You're pre-corona talking.
No.
Everyone have turn. Everyone has
Like,
a turn.
Say no all you want.
Sane people that are like about
I
to
get another
starve
drink.
and die. Same people that are about to starve and die will do those jobs to get through like the pandemic is not the same as Americans want and are willing to do those jobs.
They will do
as
them
a
for
general
15 an
concept.
hour. If you want to import people to do work for $4 an hour for American corporations against minimum law legislation, then that's not good.
You put
Well-
Americans on an assembly line job like that
Yes.
and stuck in
They're
that.
not going to do
They've
it.
done that with
I don't think they
classified
should.
that
I
is
don't think they
generations,
should.
Laura.
more than we see right now. Like that
Laura,
was
They did that
destroyed.
with cars for generations in this
And
country.
then we had like a revolution. Like that was awful.
Not everyone wants to think. I don't want to think.
Worker from the final product. Like I don't know.
I think they do it for a living wage.
Exactly.
That's what I think.
Well, here's a proposition.
Understandably.
This is something that they do in Singapore, where they would import workers in for a short time only if they have some kind of special building project. And those workers, they don't become citizens. They do the job, and then they leave, and they do the job for very little. If we are in an emergency situation, let's say, then maybe something like that could be done. But the problem is that since we have... let's face it, we do have illegal immigration in this country, and I am still reading about this, but I'm curious, like, how much money that's going to also waste in the long run. Like, there are all kinds of things that are getting in the way of people being provided for in terms of basic health, in terms of welfare. Like, I'm not against any of this stuff, but it's all about, like, how many people is going to be too much? Can we sustain the amount of people that we currently have right now? And if we can't, what needs to be cut? What do you think?
I don't think I quite understood what should be cut out of what.
Yeah, I don't know what you said.
Okay. I'm basically saying that we have a lot of unfunded liabilities. We have a lot of waste. So what needs to be cut to ensure that people have, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm pretty conservative, but I saw AOC, just demolish this guy in a committee. And I was just like, this idea, this caricature that Republicans have, conjured up of her in, thanks to people like Ben Shapiro that really helped elevate her too. It's just not there. Like, she actually just like totally hit at what I think is the biggest problem in America in both states and especially nationally is the procurement process that is used in contracts and bids for projects is a joke. And so if you say, oh, well, we can't afford to pay off, kids' student loans, and we can't afford to pay for single payer healthcare. But when you start like digging into like where the money actually goes, you can start finding the money to pay for it. It's like saying like, oh, when you're a kid and you want to go out to eat with your friends or to do something, you're trying to find money in your bedroom or whatever, and so you start looking, and you really can find a lot of money by searching through the cushions of government. And I always hate this conversation that a lot of Republicans, especially I've worked in different states now, but they're pretty blue states, but a lot of Republicans fall back on like the idea of cuts. And it's not about should we be doing tax hikes or making cuts. It's about figuring out where all the money's going and how's it being actually spent. Because if you're paying, if if the government is paying, 3 times the amount to get a product or service than they should, I mean, for every $100 product, the government's spending $300, and they don't have to do that. They could still pay the $100 that the company is actually owed, and that company is still going to make a profit. So you don't have to, it's not even like an attack on a company making even a very expensive product or service, making a profit. It's that we shouldn't be, gouging taxpayers to enrich people, friends of politicians, what have you. And there's tons of money. I don't even know if you have to make any actual cuts in government I don't think you need to go from saying we need to spend $90 instead of $100. It's like you need to maximize how you're spending that $100.
But that also means making sure that government isn't corrupt to the extent that it is here.
You can never make sure that government's not corrupt, but you can take away its power.
Well, you can also make it more transparent too, though I don't know, how much it really takes to get citizen action on these things. But the thing is like, if I actually am like thinking about going to like back to school to do like data science or be a programmer, because with like all of my knowledge from working in multiple legislatures and like working on campaigns and working with, different levels of government, it's like somebody really like, if you could create a program that just like dragged out all of the state agencies out into the sun to like basically just like disinfect their finances and financing of everything. If you could like actually track every dollar that was spent in the government and show taxpayers visually and like in an easy to understand, appealing, and all of that, I mean, it would be really revealing on like how much money is actually spent.
I agree.
Lev, did you see that article about the masks? So specifically, you had fee and reason were both talking about exactly what I was saying earlier. Like maybe that's just a little too much for vanity, but I do think it was contentious, saying that if you enter a wartime economy, like people that manufacture stuff usually convert their plants to produce other things. So if you have capabilities, but you're making widget A, and then suddenly there's an emergency and it would be profitable to shift and make widget B, but because of a regulation, because of a bureaucratic hoop you have to jump through, like you kill people. That's a silent killer, right? So you're not wrong to say we don't have that manufacturing capacity here, but it's a technicality. It's not reality.
Yeah, I actually read a really awesome piece written by a guy who works at Cato who just wrote a book. And it was all about evasive entrepreneurship and technological civil disobedience. And it just, cataloged all these people who pre-COVID and I guess now COVID, during COVID, or however you would preface that. But it's like these people that really are going to get us out of this crisis and back into like more normal state of living, they're basically breaking the law. They're saying, well, you can like come, slap me with penalties and fines and a lawsuit, but like I am going to provide this needed public service, and you have like teenagers like the 19-year-old who created the platform that pulled from all state governments all the information into a really visual, easy to understand, easy to like use system that shows like all of the up-to-date COVID statistics. And so technology, I think, and as we keep moving forward, people are just going to eventually be like, I'm not following these regulations. Like you can come, we'll resolve it in court and I'll try to win the case, because I'm not going to just sit back and not do a company that I want to do to help people because of some regulation that some, frankly, idiot came up with.
Well, I also want to hear from John. I know John's sound has been a little bit weird, but John, if you can hear us, I would love for you to comment.
Yeah, I can hear you, man. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Let me see this. The conversation's gotten a little bit off track, I guess, from what I initially thought we were going to discuss in terms of the vaccination thing.
Well, we can bring it back to the vaccination as well.
Yeah, what did you think? Let's bring it back then. What were you expecting? Or what was your point?
Well, I mean, I guess is vaccination really the only way to get things back up and running, being the fact that you have, I think, like 55 countries using hydroxychloroquine that's been around for over 60 something years. The safety profiling has already been well established. And for some reason, the media is going on this tirade that there's like this big, danger in using it, which has never been seen before. Medical doctors across the world are wondering where this is coming from.
They're not worried about that. They're worried about whether or not it's effective.
No.
They're
Actually,
saying you shouldn't take it and self-medicate on your own, but they're not worried that it's dangerous using it in late stages of COVID.
well,
They're worried
what I'm saying is that the media is putting out a big push, questioning the safety of it. I don't think
no,
that's.
they're not. They're saying
Yeah, they are. I've heard that you're not allowed to take it in the UK.
You can't take it on your own, right? You're not supposed to self-dose it.
People speculate Boris
Self-dosing?
Johnson took it, but
Somebody
it's just
say
off the menu
self-dosing?
over there.
But they're allowed to give it in the
Much
UK
dosage?
and here in the hospital. They're prescribing. I know for a fact,
Yeah,
the doctor we interviewed last week.
I mean, I was reading this on Time Magazine.
Yeah,
They
but
were
they
they
definitely-
were saying exactly
at
what John was
Montessori,
saying.
They're prescribing hydrochloroquine for sure. And
But it's off the menu in Britain. It's in the UK. You're not allowed to take it.
Said it's
John?
not.
John?
That's the big issue, is that hydroxychloroquine, you can use it in the hospital setting, but it works best not in the hospital setting, in early stage.
No,
That's all the doctors that are using it are seeing the best results, and that's the big issue, is that I don't know what's going on with policy, but if they're requiring people to only use it at the late stages, they're not going to have much effect. And I think that's the concern, is that they're not seeing the best that could be possibly you could get out of this drug.
Can I say something about hydroxychloroquine?
Yes.
Yeah, what about it?
Two things. One is the liberal media did not want it to work because Trump trumpeted it. And two is it didn't work.
Yeah.
So
who's saying
I'm-
it's not working?
but point three is
I'm looking up the study. There was a study that just
didn't
came out
work.
that said it didn't work.
Didn't
and
work.
the only study that suggested
No.
any sort of efficacy was in France, done with 28 patients. And that
Yeah,
was
but this is the
plasma,
issue.
blood plasma.
This is the issue that's taking
No.
place. Is
But
that
guys,
you guys are not looking
let me
into
have
the
1 second because I have
Yeah,
to go.
yeah, let John go.
There's Dirty Dancing. The Writers Guild of America is sponsoring a Zoom Dirty Dancing. You guys are not Writers Guild. You might be you're Writers Guild member, right, Laura? If you want to come, let me know. I'll send you the Zoom link. Nobody leaves baby on a Zoom thing.
Well,
So-
let's go to John's comment. John,
So if you want
what do
to-
you want to say?
I'll send you the link. You can join on the thing.
I want the link.
You over dirty
I'll send you the link too. I don't have anything. Just send me on chat whatever your emails are, and I'll send you the link for the Zoom.
We'll get it. We'll get it all from Lev.
It starts at 8. Everything comes from Lev. Lev, thank you very much. I really.
You're welcome.
See you.
And
I
guys, I also want to let you know that we are one of the most underrated, amazing YouTube channels of all time, and we have a Patreon. So please contribute to that Patreon. Here is the Patreon banner for all you guys to see where to go. Patreon.com/LevinJules. We would definitely appreciate more people helping grow this thing. And we appreciate all of you guys here today. Like, there is a meeting of minds from all different places. Like Laura, you are a professional journalist. John, you are like a neuroscience writer. And Jules, you are my dear friend. I love you. You're amazing. Jonathan, you are so amazing and a beautiful man and so full of knowledge. And Jillian, you are number one. You are the best. So, guys, thank you so much for being here. I should have said something about Daniel, but he's not here right now. Well, anyway, let's continue the discussion. John, you were making a point earlier.
Well, they want to state that, there's one definitive study on hydroxychloroquine, and it's a little bit silly because when you look at the details of the study, you got to look at the dose that was given, and you got to look at the stage in which the patient's disease had progressed. So all the doctors that are using it on the front lines, there's not like, I'm not talking about 50 doctors or 100 doctors, there's thousands of doctors across the globe that are using this in so many countries. And they're saying that there's a certain amount of dosage that works well at a certain stage of the disease. So if what they're saying doesn't match up to the results of the study, then the study speaks for itself in terms of that specific thing, right? So from what I understand, the study that didn't pan out well, it was a very high dosage and everybody was in a really late stage of this disease. And that's the big issue, is that it's not an apples to apples comparison. So when you just want to wave one study around and say, see, it doesn't work, that's kind of silly because you're not looking at the details. And that's the big issue, is that people are drawing conclusions based on news headlines. So we're being headline chasers. We're not looking at the details. And
I don't think that doctors are influenced by news headlines as much as you think they are.
Huh?
I don't think doctors are influenced by news headlines as much as you think they are.
I'm not talking about doctors. I'm talking about the people. The people.
I don't think you should be making decisions.
The hydroxychloroquine is based on the headlines, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that like lay people should be making a decision for the treatment of something.
No, but that's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about the perception. Your perception of hydroxychloroquine is that
like you shouldn't have a perception about the effectiveness of a drug. Like that's not how that works.
No, but I'm just saying that is your perception, is that it doesn't work, right?
No, my perception is waiting to see what the studies come out and say, right? I don't think that how you feel about whether or not a drug works based on anecdotal evidence, like should influence anything.
No, but we're talking about like, there's 44 studies on hydroxychloroquine currently taking place, right? So there's different data coming out from different places. So science is all about interpreting all the data.
Wait, Laura, is your point that since people don't really have a say in the matter anyway right now, there's nothing they could really do with that information?
No, I just don't think that like that's not how science works. Like if the drug proves to be effective in clinical trials, then it's effective. Until it's proven to be effective, like the fact that it sounds good, like because of its PR, is like not really.
But does that mean we should prevent people from trying it out more if we see its effectiveness already?
I think the state has an obligation to protect its citizens, and like part of that obligation is to tell them when they should or shouldn't.
What about right to try? What about people who are on their last breaths over here? That doesn't make sense.
But this is the thing: you're putting people who are in a desperate situation, who are grasping at anything that might be putting themselves in harm. It's the same thing. Like I don't think that people should try. I don't know. Like I don't think people should come up with their own cures for this.
But they're already in harm, though. That's the thing. If people
I know, but they could make it worse. Right? Like if you take high doses of hydroxychloroquine, it causes heart arrhythmia.
But those are known side effects. This is a long established drug.
It's a long established drug for treating malaria. So you don't know.
The point is you could take it without malaria and it's not going to kill you if you dose it properly.
But what about if you're infected with COVID? We don't know about that.
Right, but the point is if you took it without malaria, we know its toxology. It's a long established drug.
I have a question now. Like that I think slices through all of this is why is it okay for someone to try an experimental vaccine, but it's not okay to try a drug that's not called a vaccine?
That's been around for 7 years.
But doctors are using hydroxychloroquine.
They're trying to have it both ways here.
You should take home the vaccine and give it to yourself.
I guess that's the issue, though. We're talking about the only way that we're going to reopen.
I'm sure if you were letting people self-vaccinate, they would fuck it up all the time.
No, but what I'm saying, it goes back to the question of reopening up the world prior to having a vaccine. I think that listen, no matter what the studies come out regarding hydroxychloroquine, that's not going to stop the tens of thousands of doctors that are using it currently and getting results. That's not going to change their mind. They're not going to. They're not
right to try doesn't mean that you like pop a bottle of pills.
Yeah.
Right to try means that you like go to a doctor to prescribe you a drug. I mean,
for you.
with informed risks. And what about the UV irradiation of the blood, or those UV studies that they're censoring? They were just writing about in the Wall Street Journal. They wanted to bring in a UV light into the lungs and see how to isolate the rays to eliminate some of the more harmful ones that could damage your insides, and have a focused ray that could target the virus. I mean, I've watched videos of people doing it, right? And I also saw this published in the New York Times. I read the company saying, like, this is exactly what we're designing. Just because you have a bumbling president who isn't eloquent suddenly being taken out of proportion, like you said, drink bleach, it's like you're intentionally misinforming people for politics and sensationalism, instead of doing what John was suggesting, saying, well, there are 44 studies right now on hydroxychloroquine, and doing actual science when you're putting everything on the table and weighing information.
Yeah, so one of the issues that I'm seeing is that the University of Minnesota was going to do a big trial on, I guess, the early use or even the prophylactic use of hydroxychloroquine. And when they're trying to enroll 2,000 people, they were getting there, and once there was a bunch of headlines saying that it's a dangerous drug based on whatever politics or whatever the hell is going on, the enrollment stopped. It just dropped. So they can't do the trial that they want to do. They're still having problems enrolling people. And that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, the media can't influence exactly what you can take, I suppose, but it can influence the trials that are supposed to take place. So we can see whether these things have like effectiveness at different stages. And I think that should be taken into account, you know?
So do you think the only politicalization of the hydroxychloroquine is the anti-Trump sentiment? Like, what would be the incentive not to?
I think a lot of it's mindless. I think a lot of it's just wagging the dog. I think a lot of it's just like people don't trust their own ability to read and compare information, so they outsource that process to other people they trust more than themselves.
Like, what's the conspiracy? I understand why he thinks who's pushing the vaccination thing, but like, so what is the reason?
I speculate that there's some interesting things taking place with Gilead and remdesivir, in the sense of,
remdesivir is in the studies working.
Well, that's the point.
Nobody's trying to suppress remdesivir.
Excuse me?
Nobody's trying to suppress the positive effects of remdesivir.
Well, what I'm saying is this: hydroxychloroquine is a generic, right? So there's no like big pharma behind it giving any sort of media push. There's no public relations behind it. It's just a generic drug that's really cheap, that's been around forever. Remdesivir obviously has a multi-billion-dollar company in Gilead pushing it. I think they leaked the results of a study out, and it got massive press via the public relations arm.
But they do have a big pharma company. It's Plaquenil is the name of it.
No,
it's a drug that's a non-generic form.
But it doesn't just have to be Plaquenil. It could be in the generic form.
Yeah, sure. But why isn't the company that manufactures it then pushing for it?
Why would they, when everybody can get the generic for cheap? That's what I'm saying. That's what we're getting at. Remdesivir hasn't even been FDA approved yet. So what I'm saying, there's a lot of hype around it, but based on the study so far, it's not necessarily anything special per se. And that's what I'm getting at, is that the results from the remdesivir trial is getting a lot of hype.
But the FDA is going to approve it based on this study.
Exactly. That's the whole
point.
Like,
you don't think they would approve hydroxychloroquine if it worked? Like, also, isn't it incentive enough that then we could open up the country again?
Theoretically, yeah.
And also, if it did work, wouldn't Trump be able to get it through?
Wait, what?
Like, wouldn't Trump, Trump even backed away from his claims on hydroxychloroquine?
Well, because he's waiting for the trials to take place. He's waiting for the results.
No, because he knows it took place and it didn't work.
There's 44 trials out there, you know?
And they're not looking good.
Some work, some don't. And that's the point, is like—
Depends when you take it.
No, but they're also using it in real time in every single hospital. Every doctor in New York is prescribing hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, they are. Everyone that we've spoke to, it's part of the protocol at Sinai, Montefiore, all of these hospitals.
Yeah, but that's not every doctor in New York. I'm
sure the number is unbelievably low of the doctors who aren't prescribing it to people who, once they get onto ventilators. because that's the protocol in the hospitals. It would be a departure from procedure, not to prescribe it at this
You're
point.
saying that the protocol is to give hydroxychloroquine once people get on the ventilators?
I don't know like when it is, but that's part of the like prescribed.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point, though, is that the doctors that are seeing efficacy, the most efficacy, is way before the ventilator, and that's the issue.
Where?
What do you mean where?
Where are they seeing it work?
Everywhere. I mean, all the
Show me where. Because every doctor that I interviewed and every did Chile, Korea, all these places, none of them said they were using it earlier.
Okay,
And none of them said it was working.
That's what I'm saying. Those are the doctors you talk to. I'm just saying, if you can,
Show me one where it worked.
Well, where's the? You haven't found Zavenko out in New York? Dr. Zavenko. I think Timepiece did a piece on him, right? Time magazine did a piece on Zavenko out of New York.
And what did Dr. Zavenko say?
He's using it early. He's using hydroxychloroquine real early with the Z-Pack plus zinc. And he's already treated over 1,000 patients with great results. That's what I'm saying. Like, I figure that you would reach out to him, and if you want to get like a different side of the story as well, somebody saying that they are getting results.
But that's the thing. Anecdotal evidence doesn't mean anything.
It's the same thing, though.
Laura, could you define anecdotal evidence for me?
It's anecdotal evidence, like that isn't like study evidence. Hold on.
But you were
hold on, no, because you've said it a lot, because that's been like one of your taglines. I just wanted to make sure I know what that means. Like, what is anecdotal evidence?
It's like it's evidence, it's hearsay or evidence based on like one case. It's something that's not, if it's not like a double-blind study.
But that's the point. That's the point.
Right.
You're talking to doctors, right? And they're saying it.
So you are sourcing anecdotal evidence. So you're basically, so your whole attack on John was, here's all my anecdotal evidence of me talking to someone in Chile.
My evidence is saying that they
that's
have
exactly what it was. You literally
the studies. Okay, the studies are saying it's not working.
No, that's not true.
And my anecdotal evidence is that they are using it. I'm saying they're using it. I'm not saying what the results of it are.
Okay.
If you're saying they're not using it in hospitals, yes, they are using it.
And what are the results? Do they talk about the results?
No, they don't. When you talk to doctors about this kind of thing, like they don't make claims about how something works.
Doctors are closer to lay people than you realize. Like, they don't really know as much as you think.
But no,
and that's part of the
like on things
illusion.
that aren't like studies, right? Because that's how science has to work in that sense. Like, you don't want a doctor that's using like emotional judgment of whether or not something works. You want a doctor that believes in the science of things. And if you do want a doctor that does the other thing, you go to an osteopath. We have plenty of doctors, people who call themselves doctors here.
But it's been how many? Weeks already? I'm sure that the doctors do have a tally of people who have taken. I can't even say that, but you know what I mean. Who have taken it and whether they lived or died. But
I think the problem is there's so many variables here that I cannot imagine a doctor pointing to that as what made the difference, because like they will have given them so many things. But so like until there's a study, doctors won't I mean, I don't even think like legally they're liable they can say that.
Well, so John, what about
tort reform?
What about Dr. Zavenko then? He was able to say that, yes, I have great results with this and it works and we should give it to more people. What is the case with this doctor then? How is he different from these other doctors?
Well, he's starting early, and he got the publicity early, just like Dr. Rault in France. You know, I mean, he was a well-known virologist that started using the same exact setup with hydroxychloroquine. I think he's using the Z-Pack as well, and he's treated, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 patients with good results when you get it early.
And you think that it is trackable, right? Like Laura's point was that there is no way that they could actually know whether or not this was what made people better. But you're saying
it's not a scientific study. So if we're all of a sudden going to be starting to accept information with different, that we're holding to a different standard, you can't even have an argument because you're arguing on different planes.
Yeah, well, listen, obviously this is not a normal point in history, right? I mean, we can't wait 18 months for some legitimate double-blind, whatever trial that we need to do. We need to go off the best information that we can off the front lines. And just based on the fact that this thing has been around for that many years, and there's tens of thousands of doctors across the globe using it. And a lot of people, like a lot of these countries, are reporting really good results with it. Yes,
we're using it the same way those doctors are using it. Like, I don't understand what that confusion is here. We're using it.
Wait, what?
We are using it.
Not across the country. Absolutely not. That's the point, is like, if you look at the percentage of the United States using hydroxychloroquine, it's something like 20 to 30%. I mean, in other countries, it's up to 70 or 80%. And I think that, you know, when we say we are using it, it's like, no, we're not. Certain people are using it at certain points, at certain dosages. Like, for example, I believe it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, a man that was in the Sweden trial for hydroxychloroquine. There was a big headline saying that they had to stop the trial because people were getting cardiac arrest. I came and I contacted him. I reached out to him like, well, how much did they give you? And he said 6,500 milligrams over, I think, 5 or 6 days. That's over 300% greater than what Dr. Zavenko in New York is given. So it's like these things, these details are important when we want to say whether something works or whether it doesn't. At the wrong dose, something's not going to work. At the right time with the right dose, something has a better chance of working. That's pretty much what I'm getting at, the gist of it all. Based on the thousands of anecdotes so far, tens of thousands of anecdotes, we need to do something with that. That's not useless information. I mean, I think that we forget where science originated from. Science originated from just basic observation. I think that we can't discount that in the name of some sort of mutated form of science, that we're going to start disbelieving the tens of thousands of anecdotes at this point in time. We can't
throw out the scientific method.
It's useless. Excuse me?
You want to throw out the scientific method?
It's
No,
literally. Did you listen to what he said?
Yeah, I did, but he's
No,
saying
you
that we
didn't.
should go just based on
No.
observation.
That's you.
I mean,
No.
we have the scientific method to show that things work or not.
What I'm saying is that is the original science.
Scientific method is hypothesis. You test. You look at the results, and then you either create your theory or you make a new hypothesis.
I mean, that's original science. Before we had this technological boom, right, of microscopes and
That's the scientific method.
being able to look like at things that the naked eye can't see. I mean, there was science before technology, right? So we need to go, at some point, we need to understand that this is actually taking place in real time. I mean, if there's a doctor that's helping people, 3,000 patients using hydroxychloroquine, shouldn't we listen to him at least? Shouldn't we listen to the details of that?
They are, and that's why they're doing studies on it.
No, but Laura, specifically, the point that John is making is that this doctor is pointing out that if they are given earlier instead of later, there's going to be that much of a better effect.
Okay,
Is that
but
correct,
he claimed after testing the 3-cocktail drug on hundreds of patients, most of whom only had mild or moderate symptoms when they arrived, never needed to go to a ventilator. But like, if all of us got COVID, we would have mild symptoms. And if we didn't take the hydroxychloroquine, we wouldn't end up on a ventilator either because of like age and pre-existing conditions. It's just not a controlled study to be able to point to hydroxychloroquine there.
And if we
Like,
assume
I drank, I don't know, a Diet Coke on day 2 when I had it. I don't think we should start
what would be interesting
Diet Coke.
here is to see
I see what
how
you mean,
old the
yeah.
people were that were going to this doctor, how old we were, how, let's say, obese they
But the
were.
thing is, nobody's saying we shouldn't test it. People are actively testing it. And I think that we should use it if it works.
But not-
just right now,
not
there's
using
not
it
enough
prematurely,
evidence
though.
to say that it works.
John's point is that we are not using it before the time that people are really
No, I
sick.
know. And people are doing tests at all stages of it, right? Like, they're not going to suppress a cure for COVID or like a therapy. I don't think that that's something that's going to happen.
I mean, ideally, in an ideal world, but this is competition as well, right? I mean, I happen to believe that remdesivir and Gilead, they have a lot of reason to have a lot of, I guess, to not really be too happy with hydroxychloroquine taken off. You got a rival drug, right? You have a rival component.
I know, but this gets into the
What do you get?
territory of conspiracy, right? And just like the idea to constantly, I don't know, like it's too hard to.
Competition.
It's too hard to prove.
Conspiracy. This is competition, right?
No.
Yeah, that's not.
I just
Jonathan,
think
what do you
to feed
think?
to every single conspiracy theory is just
This is
How
not a conspiracy.
people cooperating like is a
possible,
conspiracy,
but yeah, it
first of
is.
all, right? Like our country was founded on a conspiracy.
Jonathan, I see the gears
Uh,
turning.
Well, I have a hard time believing that people want to suppress a cure for COVID. I mean, I agree with what Laura's saying, and I think that there's a lot of people. I mean, like she brought up like the Diet Coke thing. It's like, well, if I, sunbathed outside for 10 minutes a day and I drink 4 yerba mates a week and do all this other stuff, like while some other thing that actually cured something, like I don't go and say, well, we should write up a thing about how the cure should include all these, sun tanning and yerba mate because that's what worked for me. I mean, that's like not how science is done. I mean, you can say that in like a lifestyle like blog about like, I think part of why I was more easily able to recover than some people is because I have this like elaborate like beauty and wellness regimen. But like when it comes to finding a cure and finding a cure that we can scale, I think there does need to be studies. And I think that, it doesn't help really anyone or anything when you have like a poorly executed comm strategy around promoting any one certain drug. And people are like, oh, the media is saying all this stuff about drinking bleach and this drug or that drug, and it's like, well, the only reason that they're even able to, let's just say you do agree with conservatives that are upset about the headlines, they are only able to run with those kinds of headlines because they are given the opportunity to. At some point, like you can only complain about media so much. I mean, I've done media relations for like 10 years now, and in all these different states, Republicans will complain about how, oh, the reporters are so bad. And it's like, I'm friends with the reporters. They're not like out to get conservatives because they're, and honestly, I think a lot of times there's these reporters that I've worked with that are quite personally liberal and actually do a really good job of covering issues in legislatures where they actually give Republicans a lot of help through their press coverage. So it's like, to me, when you see the anecdotal versus the studies, I mean, we need both. And I think that a lot of great strides in human history have not been made by people following unelected bureaucrats, like every, marching rule, but like, these human intuition and invention in moments of crisis. And so if a doctor, concocts like up their own cure and it happens to save like 15 people, I don't think that they should be like criminalized for violating certain laws or procedures or whatever if what they did save people. But you don't instantly go out and scale that and say, well, this doctor did this and there's these anecdotes that it worked. You don't scale something based on anecdotes. You do need something to like make sure it's actually truly scalable.
That's fair. Let me ask you one question, Jonathan. The Bill Gates Foundation I think they're involved in a hydroxychloroquine study, like a big one in New York. I think the results are going to be out by fall of next year, not this year. Do you think that they have an incentive to create a trial that's everything's on the table to give it the best shot? Or do you think that a trial like that could be skewed knowing what they have, in the pipeline?
I do definitely think that any trial can be skewed, just like anything can be skewed by people that, I'm trying to think of what movie it was that with this example. Well, no, Thank You for Not Smoking. I can't believe I like blanked on it. But it's like all these organizations, it's like, Americans for Lungs. And it's like funded by tobacco. And they come out with a study that says, oh, it's fine if you smoke 3 to 5 cigarettes a day, just don't do 6. And have like some, good looking spokesperson go on and say, yeah, the American for Lungs study shows that 3 to 5 cigarettes is not going to kill you. It's not going to be so bad, but we don't recommend more than, 6 or more. That's dangerous. And then all these people are watching TV and they're like, oh my God, the Americans for Lung group said that 3 to 5 cigarettes a day. Well, I'm just fine. I think I'll stick to the 5 they recommended. And it's not even real. Like, none of it is real. And so I think that's a struggle too. A lot of reporters find themselves in when they're covering these, fast moving issues and really politicized things, and lives are on the line and all blah, 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 blah. And they I think feel like they have to quote both sides of an issue, and like quoting somebody that's wrong and saying wrong things is not balance. Like, I think a lot of people feel like reporters I've talked to, become friends with over all these years, and like, I went to J school before doing my master's in PR. It's like, let's say you're doing a story, an issue on like a hate crime, or I guess on, let's do it on this. Like, if you're doing a story on an outbreak, you don't interview like proponents of a virus in a story to provide balance. It's like, you don't have to include the virus spokesperson to have balance in a media report. Like, that's just not true. And I think people get uncomfortable with that. And honestly, a lot of times, like, you have generally speaking, principals are at fault for news articles written badly about a press conference they hold. So it's either them or their teams. You can't just always blame the media. It's like, if you don't want people lighting you up over saying like, bust a UV light inside someone's lungs, like, maybe don't say that. I don't know. But to me, it's there's all this talk about data and studies, and we kind of got into it earlier on the vaccine stuff, but like, we need really the thing that's different about studies than anecdotes is that anecdotes can't be rigored. There's not like a huge elaborate process that goes into them, and they're not peer reviewed while they're ongoing. Like, anecdotes are always like looking backward.
And you can't reproduce them. You can't reproduce the results.
Yeah, and whereas in a study, it's like you're witnessing it in real time as it's happening. You're not like looking back at something that already did. So, I mean, I think that's a critical distinction between the two.
I also think that when studies like this come out, people are reading somebody else's analysis of the study versus reading the study themselves. And a lot of scientific papers are behind paywalls, which I think is a problem. But I think a lot of like the issue is that when these studies come out, you're then reading like interpretations of interpretations.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, the telephone game is not a good way.
By the way, guys,
and I don't know why so many of these papers are behind paywalls.
We have someone new joining us, by the way. My friend Leslie Tempura Tang, and Jillian's longtime friend as well. Welcome, Leslie.
Hey, Lev, I'm actually older friends with you.
Perhaps, yeah.
I've known you longer.
Hey guys. Well, welcome to joining us. I actually have to get going.
Me too.
Me too.
Oh, yeah.
But thank you guys for the conversation, and I'll be sure to stay in touch.
Jonathan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan, so much.
Thanks, Jonathan, so much for coming on today.
Yeah, see you guys.
This was
Laura,
great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks, Laura. You were awesome. Thank you.
Oh, wait. John, do you have any final points before we go as far as the conversation with Laura? One last thing.
Man. We need to be able to have access to these studies to really dig through them and compare them, as journalists, to look at the data ourselves and really make up our minds,
Yeah. Well, good luck, everybody, with the final leg of the debate here.
Thank
you so much for having me. Bye, Lev.
Bye, Laura.
Bye, Laura.
John, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, fellas.
It was awesome. And guys, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And
yes, become a patron. We are hemorrhaging money. We got to keep this thing alive. Please become a patron, become a $5 patron. We're the best. We're a super underrated underground show here. We're going to blow up any day, but we need shows of support. So it might look like we're stable. We are not stable. We need money. So please become a patron.
Yeah, I can't even grab the little @LeftPo Twitter sign that's just been dangling in random places. So with your support, I'm going to be able to reclaim this little Twitter sign into its rightful area, and this will be a lot smoother. But thank you so much, everybody. And this is actually the first time I think Jules is frozen. I don't know if Jules left or is frozen.
Yes, Jules is frozen.
Yes, Jules.
Oh
says
yeah,
become the
yeah. I
Iceman.
gotta leave too. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's cool.
Oh, poor Leslie. No, well, this is the first time. Well, I was about to say this is the first time that the four of us were on the same podcast together, and Jules is frozen.
Lev, you gave me the old Dipsy Doodle.
We did not. Well, that was not timed correctly. But look, Leslie, now is your chance. Give us your take on the coronavirus and on the vaccines.
Lev,
and what you think.
you gave me the Russian schwanz. That's what you did.
These were executive decisions, Leslie. We had to put people in.
Swan.
We had to put people in like 2 people at a time, and then
No, I'm
we had to
joking.
go.
I'm joking. You know, Lev, you know we're friends.
I love you, buddy.
Wait, so what's the topic?
Coronavirus vaccine.
I heard you guys talking about Bill Gates.
It was we had a 2-hour discussion. I thought you were here for all of it, but I guess you weren't.
No, he was
No,
walking
I mean
dogs.
I was walking a dog. You know this.
Yeah, that you always are walking
So-
down.
You know this.
So for
And
those
you know Bill Gates, Donald Trump. Let me in now. Let me in now. You know that song?
No, what song is that?
Nelly, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, let me in.
No,
Country Grammar, I believe.
So
I don't know.
So Leslie, what do you
Roll
think
the
about
ball.
what do you think about the vaccine? Do you want to wait for the vaccine? Do you want the economy to open up?
What you think, boy?
What's your stance?
Wait, what about the vaccine? Tell me, I'm not into the news. What happened with the vaccine?
Leslie's like, what's a vaccine? Give me the definition of a vaccine.
I sometimes I wish I was in Leslie's position, where I'm just walking dogs, not a care in the world.
I really don't. I'm like, why has everyone got masks on?
Wait, you're not wearing a mask?
He's inside. You're not wearing a mask. No, he's kidding.
No, but
Of course he's
Lev,
wearing a mask.
Lev, check this out. Lev, check this
All right.
out. Check this out. Look at this. Whoa, what's up? What's up?
See, I don't even know if that helps anybody. Like that kind
Look,
of mask,
look, look.
as opposed
Lev,
to the...
look at this. Look, Lev, I'm Hawaiian now. Mahalo. Look at this, Lev. How much do you think I can get this for? How much money on the streets?
Oh, okay, that's a different story. Now
Leslie,
I'm
that's
impressed.
a used one. No one wants your used.
My sister
ass.
gave me this. You know it's legit.
Well,
Yeah,
Leslie,
but you're using it now, man.
Well,
You've
Leslie-
already.
Oh, no.
Your
Oh, shit. Oh,
your
shit.
sister-
Good condition.
your sister is a doctor, right?
Yes.
So she's got
And
the
his other
inside-
sister is a veterinarian.
Yo,
Not
Lev,
also a
you're
doctor.
kind of Jewish. Look at these bagels I made.
Those are very nice bagels.
He is Jewish.
I am. I'm full Jew.
He
Well,
said you're kind of Jewish.
All right.
My
Listen, I
mom
don't
is
want
Jewish.
to. I don't want to offend your Gentile fans.
By the way, speaking of Gentile
The
fans,
9
our
people watching.
Wappin just wrote, "I like him. He's silly."
Who?
Our
He's
Wappin.
silly as hell.
Yeah, so you got some fans. Do you remember you were talking before about having fans? Well, now
Oh,
you
geez,
officially
Yeah.
you officially have a fan in our Wappin. Our
Raise that
Wappin, by
roof.
the way, if you
Raise that
want to
roof.
raise the roof. Our Wappin, if you want to come in on this discussion right now, I want to hear your take on the coronavirus, and you will have a chance to talk with the great Leslie Tempura-Tang.
Oh wait, are we live?
Dude, we're live.
we
Like
are
six
all the way
people
this
live.
was like pre-recorded.
Nope.
Leslie's like, I've been saying a lot of shit. I didn't think.
Oh wait. Okay. So, anyways, what is my take on the coronavirus? So, you know, a part of me is like, open up America. I need some grass seed. And then a part of me is like,
Our Wappin wants to come in, man.
Yeah, I'm
He
gonna
wants to
get
come
him in right
in.
now.
How do
Here
you
we go.
guys? How do you guys get notification? I can't see this.
That's cause you not in the thing.
You
You
know,
have
I
to-
told Lev
the
that we
live
would
stream link.
co-mediate, but he didn't want that.
No, it was probably for the best.
The
Well-
fuck?
Ooh, I'm better at video game incel talk. That's what I'm good at. No, but I know next time. I'm prepared. This was my first time doing it. Now I know what to expect.
Mhm.
I was watching for 30 seconds. Jillian was not prepared.
No, well, I didn't really realize what I had to do, but now I know, and
They were like, "What's your opinion, Jillian?" And you're like, "I don't have one."
no, it's true because I didn't know. I thought I had to just like moderate. I thought I'd just be like, okay, and now what do you think? I didn't know anyone was gonna ask what I thought. So
And then that guy was like, "Okay, cool."
Ryan,
okay,
What's
you
up?
dumb bitch.
Ryan is officially in the stream. Ryan,
What's
you
up,
get to meet
Ryan?
the great Leslie Tempura Tang.
Hello.
Hey Ryan. Hey Ryan,
Hey,
where are you
Ryan.
from?
I'm from Vancouver, but not Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, Vancouver, America.
Vancouver, America.
Vancouver,
See the
where?
flag behind me.
Hell yeah, brother.
I see your American flag. I have
Wait.
an Australian map.
Where's Vancouver,
Oh, nice.
America?
Vancouver, America is in Washington, but not Washington, D.C.
Oh,
So it's very confusing.
lots going on.
Oh shit, Washington. It's like 5 o'clock over there.
Yep, that's right.
We know that because one of our best friends lives there. Oh wait, no, never mind. That's not.
No,
Unless
no.
he's in DC. Sorry, not Washington State.
Okay, Ryan, what's your opinion on the vaccine?
Well, there's not a vaccine yet, right? Apparently they're saying it's gonna take like months before we have one.
Leslie's anti-vaccine.
So I did my research. The fastest vaccine was actually 4 years.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I definitely am not in favor of a mandatory vaccine. I think that would be a total disaster.
So listen. So Sweden has this whole herd policy. Do you know this method? The herd, which is like everyone can go
I've heard about
outside.
that.
Nothing is closed in
You've
Sweden.
Yes, I've heard about it.
Yeah. So in Sweden, they have this policy where you can just go outside, survival of the fittest. And then on the other spectrum, there's the Chinese, which is like a police state. So which one do you believe in?
Well,
Lev?
I think the first thing I should say
Lev?
is that I'm just an artist. I really like I was listening to this whole conversation and I am not nearly as well versed on the details of all this
It's
stuff.
okay.
as-
I wasn't
the people who
invited,
were in
so I
here
didn't
were.
even
Who do you
listen to
think
the
won?
You're ahead of me, Ryan. Don't worry.
Who do you think won the debate? I mean, there were a couple
I'm-
of people
I'm-
competing, but
I'm biased towards being against mandatory vaccines and also I also have high hopes about hydroxychloroquine. I think it's kind of strange how much the media has been pushing against that drug.
well, what I didn't understand in
Yeah.
this conversation was that Dr. Zavenko that John was referring to. How many of the people who have taken this hydrochloroquine at his office were like obese or really old, and how many of those have taken it when they were still in like the the pre-stages, not at the stage where you're already ready for the ventilator. Because if we find that out, then we could say, okay, at least with this anecdotal evidence, we could see that this guy got a lot of positive results. But since we don't have that information, other than this interview, which I did not
Well,
look at,
do we
yet
have
as well.
that information?
Well,
We
this
might
is what
have that
John was
information.
saying, that this Dr. Zemenko gave all this information out in an interview. So over here it says, New York Times, touting virus cure, simply country doctor, how Dr. Vladimir Zelenko's claims for his coronavirus treatment spread from a New York village all the way to President Trump. So here they're tying it with Trump, and let me show you guys actually what the good doctor looks like. Although again, I am not good at these screenshot things. It's probably not going to work out the way I think. So let me do it a slightly different way, so you guys will just see his face. But anyway, what do you think of all of these anecdotal evidences? Like, is it enough, or is it still too too dangerous as far as giving this to people who may not show the symptoms that severely yet?
Well, first of all, it's definitely more than just that one doctor, right? There's lots of doctors out in the world trying this out, like John was saying. And the other thing I would say that I think is important to point out is that this drug is not a new drug that was developed to treat coronavirus. It's been around for years. I think it was originally developed to treat malaria.
Yeah, and they said
And
it was
it's been
about
being
7
used for
years,
that
I
for a
think,
long time.
is what they said.
And isn't it like, I don't know if it's over the counter, but it's not like hard to get. Like it's a generalized drug. It's cheap. But I would think that it would have to be tested for safety to get that far. I don't know.
No, I'm definitely with you there. I mean, they made a lot of good arguments on both sides. As far as what Laura was talking about, though, she does not like conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Lev, you love conspiracy theories.
Well,
That's true.
I
And
know,
so
I don't
Lev
love
and Jules
conspiracy-
both love conspiracy theories. Laura
Not
was
true.
really
Not true.
anti.
I do not love conspiracy theories. I love testing things out, and I never make up my mind one way or another before I have all the facts.
Yeah, what I
So
would
I
say
have
is
an
it's
open
more
like
like,
a Russian
I think it's
Mythbusters.
more. I think it's more he's not. If something generally starts off as a conspiracy theory, the fact that someone defines it as a conspiracy theory is not necessarily enough to set Lev off of diving in a
Exactly.
little bit deeper to
Well-
figure it out. But I think some people, they hear the word conspiracy and it's a trigger point to automatically turn people off and just say, oh well, this isn't valid, right?
It's kind of like
Yeah,
it's kind of like finding a
used-
diamond in the rough, where there's
It's
going
used
to
to
be...
it's used to invalidate an argument you don't agree with often.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as far as diamond in the rough, there's going to be a lot of crap Ola out there as far as, let's say, the conspiracy theory about 5G infecting people with the coronavirus, or the conspiracy theory about using a like getting a microchip, like a little nanotechnology microchip when you receive your coronavirus vaccination. Like, those exist in the same realm, unfortunately, as, let's say, Jeffrey Epstein, which for a long time people ignored. There was that lady, Amy Roebuck, who was talking about how she wanted to publish a story on Epstein, and the news agency didn't let her. Like, the higher-ups did not let her. So that would be an
He didn't
example.
kill himself.
Do you guys know where the origin of the term conspiracy theory?
I'm curious to know, actually.
I know, but I want Ryan to say it.
I have no idea. I'm curious.
It was actually developed by the CIA and put into the public lexicon, I guess you could say, by the CIA in order to dismiss investigations into things they didn't want people investigating.
Boy, that really worked, didn't it?
Roswell.
Yeah, it was quite brilliant, I gotta say.
God, it's brilliant. It was just like they got a bunch of psychologists
like
up in there, and they're like, "How
evil
can
genius.
we do this?"
Yep, they're good at that stuff.
What year was that? Yeah, they're the best, right? What year?
The
Around what time?
60s, I believe. I think it was right after the JFK assassination. Actually, that was what it was mainly made for.
Roswell's interesting. There's this guy, Jason.
They say it was a weather balloon, but we know it isn't.
There's this dude, Jason Giorgiani, who I actually talked about in the last podcast too, and he's kind of a controversial figure as far as his affiliation with the alt-right. So this is already like a figure that I would not say...
No, don't mind me.
Like he isn't clean in the sense that he has been besmirched by people who claim that this guy is like some neo-fascist or whatever. From the videos that I've seen of Giorgiani when he's just talking about like metaphysical things or psychological things or whatever, I don't see that element in him. And I tend to lean on the side of his friend Jeffrey Mishlove, who is this Jewish guy, super friendly, like very... seems like a very loving person, and he's been around forever. Like, he's interviewed Rupert Sheldrake, I believe, like back in the 70s. So anyway, Giorgiani goes on Mishlov's show and talks about how he thinks that Roswell was intentionally done, and here, this is just going to be a stream of consciousness. I in no way endorse this theory. But,
Okay.
Giorgiani thinks that it was the Nazis that intentionally crash-landed UFO, which was one of their machines, and put like a deformed person in there to look like an alien in order to just screw around with the Americans while they're actually hiding out in Antarctica and have actually way more advanced technology than we could ever dream to have, and how they actually won the war, and how all the Operation Paperclip scientists that the United States took themselves were actually still working for the Nazis, and how this also led into the takeover of the military-industrial complex, which, according to Giorgiani, most of that complex is actually the Nazis who are still around. So we lost World War II, according to Jason Giorgiani.
Oh my God. I mean,
There's a lot of crazy stuff involving Antarctica,
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah, that
Admiral
is the thing.
Byrd's
It
expedition.
all goes
there.
back to Antarctica.
thing.
All roads lead to Antarctica.
that's so true.
Well, there
Even the flat Earth goes to Antarctica.
Did you see
That's
that
where
Predator
that's where
movie?
they say the ice
Predators
wall
are in
is.
Antarctica.
How does flat Earth go to Antarctica? I don't know this one.
Because the edge of the Earth is Antarctica, basically,
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
and the North Pole is the center. That's what they say.
Okay, fair enough.
And not only that, it gets even crazier. Not only do they say that Antarctica has bases there where Nazis are living, but there is actually an inverted Earth, so like a hollow Earth, and there's a hole that you could go down through that leads to this hollow Earth, and there's all kinds of really, really awesome civilizations there that are way more advanced than us, that live in a much better condition. There's like a sun in the center, so we don't have a core, according to this theory. We have a central sun. And it's also known as the Smoky God. There was a book that was written about this called The Smoky God.
The sun god. The
Exactly.
Incans and the
It is-
Mayans.
well, like the inner sun god. And speaking of the Mayans, I believe either the Mayans or the Aztecs or some civilization had a tunnel entrance that went into the inner Earth, and so do the Tibetans in that building that the Chinese took over now. I remember, like, the King's Palace or whatever that's called.
To
So-
all the fans who are watching, you gotta remember to free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
Free Tibet.
And I don't know, Ryan, like, how much are you familiar with the whole inner Earth theories?
I mean, I've looked into it just because I think it's like, oh, that would be cool if it were true. But I don't know if I'm like super
Lev
well
believes in it.
versed on what all the
I
different
believe
mythologies
nothing.
about it are.
No, that's not true. I believe things that I can say for certain were done through the scientific method and all that. Jules has an interesting take, by the way, on Hollow Earth, so I really wish he was here right now. Jules, come back if you want to talk Hollow Earth. This forum is open for you. But anyway, what I find interesting about it is to think, you know, like we're kind of like on the outside, right? Like if there is a Hollow Earth, then we are like, we're in the doghouse. You know, we're not protected from like meteors.
Well, part of the reason Antarctica is so mysterious is that no one's allowed to go there. Even if you were, it would be really hard to.
Yeah.
No, that's true. They have a lot of military
Flipped
checkpoints
into
there.
something more comfortable,
Ooh,
It's a little bit cold there.
like my T-shirt.
I love it.
Really good.
It's tacos.
It's Taco Tuesday, bitch.
So Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself, because last time there were too many people here, and we did not get enough chance to find out about this wonderful animator here in front of us.
About me, gosh, I'm just a guy that does animation for a living.
Oh, like
Whether-
Lev?
Like Lev. But
Yep.
Ryan, you've been a lot more prolific in the last years as far as your content. You are very active on Newgrounds.
Oh,
Mhm.
dope. I want to see that. I love
Yeah,
you.
most of my stuff lately has been kind of just the boring freelance stuff that I have not posted out on the internet. But I did put out a new cartoon recently, just a short one called T, just the letter T,
Oh my God. You're
and
gonna
that's on Newgrounds. My Newgrounds handle is the same as my handle everywhere else, which is R Weapon. That's
It's
R
our what?
R Weapon. That's R. Well, sometimes it has a space, sometimes it doesn't. But RWAPPIN, and that is my Twitter, and that is also my Newgrounds account.
Whoa.
Hey Ryan, I have to leave. New best friend.
Oh, okay. I actually probably got to leave too, but I'm glad I could pop in here real quick towards the end.
And
Farewell, my
farewell.
friends.
This is
Okay,
the end. Well, this
so-
is the end of the episode then. I shall
Okay,
bid everybody
guys.
adieu.
Goodbye.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to like, and also don't forget to become a
Comment.
patron. Go to patreon.com/loveandjules. Give us money. We need it. We are the most underrated, amazingest podcast/live stream video show of all time, and we are bringing people together, as Ryan, you were witness to today. You saw like how many different people we had here of differing opinions. Like,
Yeah, it was a really good show. It got really had a lot of different points that all came together well and made for a really interesting discussion. So
Thanks for watching, man.
really good stuff.
thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.
See you soon. Like,
All right,
comment, and
guys.
subscribe.